Another season is in the books, and despite 10 wins, the Seahawks will be watching the playoffs from home. The Athletic's Michael-Shawn Dugar helps me contextualize the year, prepare for what's next, and determine whether 2024 should be considered a successful season. Let's light 'em up.
I'm Jacson Bevins, and this is Cigar Thoughts.
Welcome back to the Cigar Lounge. I am Jacson Bevins, and along with my ephemeral producer, Mike Barwin, this is the Cigar Thoughts podcast. And there is a lot to get into with our guest today, but first, shout out to our sponsors. Cigar Thoughts is proud to be partnered with Seattle Cigar Concierge and Glenfiddich Single Malt Scotch Whiskey, two companies whose products I enjoy on a regular basis. And look, by now you know the deal. The Cigar Thoughts cigars are fantastic, and it's not just me saying so. Feedback has been awesome, and you can get your own bundle of 10 for just $149 using the link on the show page or by going to cigarthoughtsnfl.com. They're an excellent way to kick back and enjoy, and they make a great gift for the stogie lover in your life. Mike and I love doing this show, and there are two ways y'all listening and watching can help support it so we can keep the episodes coming. One is by purchasing the cigars, which I can't believe I haven't done this before. This is what is going to show up in your mailbox. This is the Cigar Thoughts Red Zone Bundle. Get that, like I said, just $149 for a bundle of 10 cigars that sell for between $35 and $40 per stick on the open market. The other is by subscribing to our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts, where you can watch full episodes as well as the funny and insightful clips that Mike puts together. Give a thumbs up to the stuff you like and let us know what you think in the comments. And of course, you can listen to us everywhere you get your podcasts. Look, the holidays are over and so is the Seahawks season. But this week also marks the end of a 13-year run writing the Cigar Thoughts postgame recaps. I want to take a minute to thank everyone who reached out in person and online with some unbelievably kind words and gratitude for the articles over the years. You know, my wife Pauline and I were reading the comments on the final article, and she started crying at the heartfelt appreciation that was shown. And honestly, that made me tear up as well. I've been doing this every Seahawks Sunday for a long time now, and I get a little emotional thinking about not doing it anymore. It's still wild to me that my own personal post-game therapy ended up connecting me with thousands of sports fans, as well as many of the people who do the real work in sports media. And one of those people is the man joining me now. And I'm stoked because I'm very eager to get his take now that the Seahawks are done for the year. You know him as the award-winning writer for The Athletic and the host of the Seahawks Man-to-Man podcast. He's one of my favorite dudes to talk ball with, and I am excited to have him here today. He is Michael-Shawn Dugar. Mike, thanks for coming in.
What's going on? And congrats on a good Cigar Thoughts run. It's great, man. It's a staple of the Seahawks internet world, I would say. I say that with confidence.
Yeah, and I never thought or intended for it to be that, but let me get the shit out of my head that was in there after each game, and it's cool. It's cool that it resonated with people, and again, I just said it, but it's very cool that is providing an avenue for me to meet people in the industry, people I look up to. One of those being yourself, and I'm stoked to have you. Like when Mike and I first reached out, we were like, man, who do we want to put a bow on this season? Because lots of great options, and there's a number of people we would love to have, but there's a reason you're the guy that we reached out to. And I'm stoked you're here. And look, man, let's just jump right into this, because I think you and I may have differing viewpoints here. I get real excited when I find myself disagreeing with someone who is as smart and connected as you are, because it provides an opportunity to test the strength of my conviction, as well as, create a chance to have my opinion changed. So let me ask you this straight up. Was 2024 a successful season for the Seahawks?
No, I wouldn't say so. Let's start by the team's own standards, because success is relative. By the team's own, absolutely not.
Of course.
Mike McDonald, I actually asked him what his expectations were for the season. This was on Tuesday, and he said he wanted to win the Super Bowl. And then obviously every coach wants to say that, right? But then he detailed like the little steps that I'm sure were very realistic. You want to win your division, start there. If you can't win your division, at least get in the playoffs. Do one of those two things, and then once you do that, you obviously want to go win the conference and make the big dance. And just taking the coach speak out of it for a second, I know that based on all the public messaging, even before the season, like John Schneider was very clear that like Jody told him go win. That was the goal. Like 9-8 wasn't good enough. It was kind of fun and frisky in 2022 after trading Russ, but then in 2023 there were real expectations, and they just went 9-8 again. And I know they went 10-7 this year, but I mean, who knows what would have happened if that game mattered to the Rams, right? Like anything, could have happened in that game. So they got a 10th win. There's no asterisk by it technically, but I do like to put that 10th win in context. So because they were largely a version of the team that got everybody fired. They wanted to make tangible progress, not just like fix a few things here, take a few steps back here, just shuffle around what the issues were. They wanted to make progress, wanted to make the playoffs. So by their own expectations, definitely was not a success. It wasn't like an awful season, winning 10 wins or getting 10 wins is great. Even if they got 9, that's cool too. But they wanted more, which is why they fired Pete, and got rid of all his guys. They determined we can be more successful with better coaches. They changed coaches and basically didn't get any more successful. So that's like if I take the ownership view. Now, my view, I think it's not necessarily a failure on Mike's part. I really feel like it's an organizational failure, why the season was successful. Because I feel like if you take Mike out of it, John, Jody, Burt Cold, everyone who basically was in charge of hiring Mike and firing Pete, they created these expectations that I just talked about and then did nothing really of significance to make them come to fruition. It was just, let's just shuffle the roster around a little bit and then get new coaches and we'll be fine. And that was just, in my view, super arrogant. So to do that and put Mike in that situation where he's the last coach hired, he's the youngest coach hired, he really doesn't have a Rolodex to fill out a staff. You don't spend in free agency. You have just a regular haul of draft picks, not like 2021, but you weren't flush with them either. And to give him all that and say, all right, now go be better than Pete Carroll. If you put it that way, that's pretty arrogant, man. It's the same thing with Gerard Mayo. Robert Kraft, and he was like, hey, man, you're the guy in waiting, but Gerard, I need you to go be better than Bill with a very similar roster that Bill had. And then he wasn't, and he got fired, and even Robert Kraft got up there and said, I put him in an untenable situation. So I think the failure for me kind of comes to a version of what Robert Kraft said to the Patriots media is, I put Gerard in a bad situation, an untenable one is his words. And I think the Seahawks did the same thing to Mike. And I think just doing that is failure to me, because I think it's their job to set the coach up for success. And they did not do that. They made some progress in a few areas, took a step back in some other areas. They're just still on the treadmill to me. And I think that they purposely made this big move to get off the treadmill. And if you look at it in a binary way like that, I think that is wholly unsuccessful, both in my view and I think from the organization's view.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that you said there is that it comes down to perspective. It comes down to expectations. Success is relative to expectations. And there's an old saying that happiness is reality minus expectations. And so, for me, my expectations, I'm going to push back on a couple of things here before I lay this out. So one, we're throwing a lowercase asterisk on the 10 wins, right? Because look, they barely beat a Rams team that sat most of their starters on offense and a number of their starters on defense. And it was very, very
They were 9 yards away
lost
from losing the game, yes.
Straight up. Absolutely. So,
we can even operate under the premise that they just got 10 wins. Let's just call it 10. We can remove that.
Yeah, I was going to say, because, on the other side of the bracket, are the Broncos, not a playoff team, because if they lose to the Chiefs in Week 18, they're not in. Bengals get in. They played all backups. Chiefs didn't even try. Broncos are in, right? So for me, I think what's a little bit tough is the Seahawks are the first 10-win team in NFL history to miss the playoffs. Never happened before. Now, granted, we've only had a 17-game schedule. for, a few years. Fact remains, they didn't win the division. A clear goal of every coach is going to say, yes, it starts with winning the division. So not unique to Seattle. They lost it on the 5th tiebreaker, a tiebreaker that didn't even exist a few years ago. And if the tiebreaker that did exist a few years ago, point differential was in play, Seattle wins. And Seattle is the NFC champ, and they're hosting a playoff game, and they're hoisting a banner. And to me, if that is, and I'm not saying this is your view, but it's certainly the view of lots of fans, how can you call it a successful season if you don't even make the playoffs? Well, they're the best team wins-wise ever to not make the playoffs. And if they had won a 5th down-the-list tiebreak to get in, most of those people, I'm guessing, are going to say, yes, this is a successful season. They won the division. So sure, there's things you look at. You should have beat the Giants. You should have beat the Rams the first time. And then this is moot, right? Like, every team has things they could go back and have done better. But this was a 9-8 team. Sure, last year they got outscored by like 50, 60 points. Seattle outscored their opponents this year. And that was the case before the Rams game. So to me, I saw real progress from a team in most areas with a first-year head coach, with a 34-year-old quarterback, with a coaching staff, which on your show, you've done a phenomenal job of laying out, that has no experience in the roles they were asked to fill. It's not like, well, hey, at least we got this guy who's been through it. I mean, I guess that's Leslie Frazier, but he's kind of in an advisory role. They went out there, worst offensive line that maybe we've seen from Seattle, which is saying something. Won 10 games, barely missed out on the playoffs. To me, that is a successful season.
Yeah, I think for what it's worth, I forget. I think it was a guy at the AP in the Bay Area, Josh DeBow or something like that. He had the stat. There was another 10-win team that missed the playoffs. I want to say it was the Dolphins in 2020. I have to fact check that, but I do think so. So I do think you can get to 10 wins and miss it. But yeah, I think all of that. So let's put it this way. I agree in that Mike did what I expect him to do. I just don't think he was in a position to do much more. But I think the people that hired him expected more. Whether that's fair or not is actually probably the better question. Should they have expected more based on what they gave him? Because you're right. Yeah, they missed the playoffs by the skin of their teeth. They also made it by the skin of their teeth in 2022. I think it's hard to be with the
100%.
I think it's hard
100%.
to be with the. I mean, also honestly, if we think about it, I think about the 2023 season. It's probably just because I had that. I could see that Quandre said something to Matt Prater in that week 18 game last year. Because remember, they won the Arizona game last year because Prater missed a kick. And you could see that Quandre said something to him. At least I could, because I was there. I could see him say something to him. And I think he said something to him, like an inside joke about their time in the Lions or something. Like, I can't remember. Something about Matt Patricia or something. And he pushes the kick. Sure. And I view the 2023 season as like, you guys probably shouldn't even had a chance, but thank God for Quandre, who just got in the kicker's head, did his version of what Sark just did to his kicker at Texas in the CFP. So yeah, it really is just
that's like who was it? It's like LeBron going up to Gilbert Arenas when he's at the free throw line.
In the playoffs.
And he, they're down one with a few seconds left. Gil's got 2 shots, and LeBron walks up to him and says something like, "Be a shame if you miss both of these."
I can't remember what Andre said to him. It's in my notes somewhere, but like I feel, it's the skin of their teeth, and I think that's if they just got right back to the skin of their teeth thing, that's probably what I expected Mike to do. I just know that they wanted more. I didn't expect more, because I just know how hard coaching is. Like the longer you get in this business, at least for me, if you do it right, and you're not like I'm not a huge like source breaker, news chaser person. Those people are operating in a different world, a very much different world. But for people in my world, the thing you learn, 2 things you learn really doing this a lot is the humanization, if that's a word, of the players, and then how hard it is to coach. That's like the 2 things that I've come to learn the most. And the making the players human, that it's not really pertinent to this discussion, but the coaching part really is, man. Like, to hear some of the stuff that like the coaches tell these guys. Drop my mic. Sorry about that. To hear some of the stuff that the coaches tell these guys.
Dropping the mic this early in the show. Come on.
The coaches hammer stuff home with these guys, and how often they just tell them stuff and then it just doesn't come to life and it's the kid's fault. Or like I remember one game, I forget. I think it was the Saints game in 2022 where Taysom Hill looked like God, right? And I remember talking to, I don't even remember what player it was now in the offseason. He was just like, yeah, Mike, we ain't even really practiced the Taysom Hill package that much in practice that week. And I was like, are you kidding me? That's like half of what the Saints do. I think their quarterback was Andy Dalton that year too. So like the Taysom thing was very much but it's like stuff like that, just little moments where coaching just matters so much. So I knew that when Mike got this staff and there was going to be so many growing pains. I knew there would be games like the Giants game. I knew there would be games where I figured there'd probably be a game. This didn't come to fruition, but I figured there'd probably be a game where in one of those do or die situations on defense, Mike sent the house and it backfired. Like I thought they were probably going to lose a game like that. They didn't, but that was an example I thought of, like probably an aggressive coach wanting to show his stuff. Coach loves his blitzes, and it just backfiring. And he's like, oh well, that's a game that you lose due to the coach's inexperience. And they had some games like that. Hell, they almost lost the game to the Jets because it's special teams, which regressed this year as well. So yeah, like I think Mike did okay with what he was given. I think a lot of coaches did that. Mike was no different. He took over a 9-win team and essentially won like 9.5 games. Cool. It's basically what I would have expected him to do. I just know that people who hired him was like, hey, let's add all these void years to people's deals, something they don't usually do, and let's swipe the credit card a little bit because we're trying to win right now. And I just think that was just a crazy thought. Nothing they did really suggested they're going to win this year. It was, we just changed which team they lost to. I thought they'd be second place to the Niners. They ended up second place to the Rams. It flip-flopped to me. So you're right. Like, with all the context of like the degree of difficulty, sure. Yeah, Mike he had a really hard job. I think he and Gerard Mayo and me and our Patriots guy, Chad Graff, were initially going to do a story on this together to start the season, but he had a better idea, so I let him roll with that. Well, he had already been cooking. I hit him up in like early August, like, hey, I'm thinking this for our season preview, and he was like, oh, well, I already got this in the works, and I was like, oh, damn, that is good. So I'll think of something else. But my premise for that, we were going to do a joint story in my mind on the degree of difficulty of those two guys as first-year coaches, because they were taking over for legends, Super Bowl winners, and they were asked to be better than some of the best we've ever seen. And that's asking
parallel,
a lot.
Another parallel, they were the two youngest head coaches in the NFL who were taking over for the two oldest head coaches in the NFL. You're right. I had not until this moment thought about the parallels between those two situations. One of the things that I've always appreciated about your perspective is that it comes with nuance. And, if I'm hearing you correctly, when you talk about this being a failure of a season, you're really putting that on the top level of the franchise. That's ownership. That's front office. That is not equipping a first-time head coach with the resources and the roster necessary to meet the expectations that they put forth. Because Mike Macdonald and every coach is going to say, yeah, our goal is to win the division. Our goal is to win the Super Bowl. And to me, and I'll go through this with you. You tell me agree or disagree, but I feel like this is a successful season for Mike Macdonald as first-time head coach, dealing with what he was dealing with. That to me is a success. I don't think many first-year head coaches win more games than they lose flat out. 10-7, whatever. To me, feels like, okay, there's no sense that we hired the wrong guy. And for me, I've said this all season long, this has been a diagnostic season in my mind. This is where you take one season to figure out what's working and what isn't, because you've cleared the decks on the coaching staff. I think Mike Macdonald is working. We saw that because the defense figured itself out and trended up over the back half of the season. That's what I wanted to see.
Yeah, I think Mike Macdonald succeeded. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think but I don't view it in the context of him really, because I viewed this offseason as John, Bert, Jody, particularly John, because he, was him and Pete were Batman and Robin. John just basically looked at the thing, and Jody did too, and said, well, Pete's the problem, And that's really arrogant. I actually think that's a misdiagnosis of what the problems were. I view it as, did you guys achieve what you said you guys were the solution, and you could find better, and you did not. They basically said they could do it immediately too, because they were like, we're not tearing it down, right? So they didn't necessarily signal that they were going to give Mike this grace. Obviously they signed him to like a 5 or 6 year deal, but everyone does that. I think Gerard Mayo wasn't on a 1 year, right? Gone already. So is Antonio Pierce, right? The contracts don't matter.
I don't think that when they promised that job to Gerard Mayo, they expected Mike Vrabel to be available.
Right, yeah. So
what I mean?
I do think you're right. Yeah, I am definitely I'm viewing this through the people who said that they weren't the problem. Because I just thought that was just really, really. I keep saying the word arrogant because it really was, man. Like, I don't know how.
Yeah.
I just could not look at let's start from 2014, last time they made the title game. Just not even the Super Bowl, just the title game. Let's look at we're now a decade removed from that, right? We got 10 years of data, 10 seasons. You mean to tell me this was a Pete and a coach thing? Come on. That is nuts to me. I would have either, after the 2023 season, if they're going to do something, I would have punted on Pete and John, or I would have kept Pete and John. Separating the two seemed like you were giving one person far too much benefit of the doubt. Like if they'd have kept Pete and fired John, I'd have been like, man, that's giving Pete a lot of benefit of the doubt here that John was the problem. And the inverse, I believe, is true too. For him to just punt on the coach, I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know if you've given Pete the rosters you think you've given him. And the same thing applies to 2024. I don't think he gave Mike the roster he thought he gave him. I mean, he didn't. I guarantee he didn't.
And if the two are going to share the glory, they got to share the blame too. And you're right. It felt like, okay, something big needs to change. We need to message to the fans and to the organization that we, winning 9 games every year isn't good enough. We're going to take a swing. And I said this before the hire. Mike Macdonald was the number one guy I was hoping that they would hire, and I hope it works out. I think early returns are mostly good on that. But I want to actually skip ahead. I was going to bring this up later, but since we're talking about it, how far away are we from having the John Schneider conversation? Because ownership put their faith behind him and basically gave him the keys to the car and said, all right, you drive this thing. I think this was his worst offseason ever. I mean, I don't know how you can whiff on a free agent class more. Like, who is their biggest free agent contributor? Was it Pharaoh Brown, who I think had as many penalty yards as receiving yards? Like, who else did they bring in as a free agent that contributed to this team? And then you've got an offensive line that somehow regressed. I don't know how you regress from where you were before, but that shit ain't working for like the 12th straight year.
Oh, yeah.
And all of these issues that we point to, like from my perspective, if the Seahawks had the 16th best offensive line, I'm not saying you got to be top 10, top 5, the 16th best offensive line. We're not having Geno Smith conversations like we're having, and we're not having DK Metcalf conversations like we're having. And that's not a new problem. So it's like, I do like the last couple of drafts for the most part, but what reason should fans have, if any, to believe that John Schneider is the right guy to give Mike Macdonald the roster he needs?
This is like that scene in iRobot when Will Smith shows up to the crime scene after a dude gets thrown out the window and he touches the little button and it's the hologram of the scientist dude, and he asks him the questions, and then he asks him stuff, and he can't. It's pre-recorded because he's dead, right? He's like, "Yo, I can't answer that question, detective." And then he finally asks the right question, and then the answer in the hologram is, "Now that, detective, is the right question." And I think that's where it has to go. I responded to someone on Twitter today. They said, "Can the Seahawks win a Super Bowl with Geno?" And I really should have just hit him with that, with a GIF of that movie scene, because that's the wrong question. Right. The question is, how much faith do you have in the people that are in charge of building this thing? Because every Super Bowl team, I hate the conversation about how much the quarterback salary cap hit is. Like, I feel like that's the wrong variable to isolate, because the variable to isolate, typically the strongest one, I think, when you look at Super Bowl contenders, so let's say the teams that make the Final Four every year, is typically trench play to some extent. It's typically trench play. They either have a nasty-ass D-line or a really good offensive line, or both.
Yes.
Most of the time, it's both.
Yes.
The Seahawks have not had either of those things in the same season since 2014. Let's say maybe we can go 15 if you'd like. I won't push back on it, but my number would be 2014. That's 10 years. That's a long time. It don't matter who the quarterback is under those circumstances.
They had the most money allocated to the offensive line in 2013 and 2014 of any team in the NFL. And now they're among the least year over year. Like, bro, that won you a Super Bowl. You won a Super Bowl putting all your eggs in that basket. You almost won a second Super Bowl putting all your eggs in that basket. And then, I mean, I get it. Look, you had a bunch of Hall of Famers who weren't on the offensive line that needed new contracts. I get that. Those guys been gone for a while. Cam Chancellor been out of this building for a long time. Marshawn and Earl Thomas and Richard Sherman, Russell Wilson, Bobby Wagner, they've been out of this building for a long time. And those resources never got reallocated to the offensive line.
Yeah, I think John's process there wasn't bad, like you said. John will tell you, and I think he said it before, well, the reason that the money got reallocated to defense because we had Hall of Famers. And you know what, John? That's fine. If you had to take some money out of the O-line pot because you paid Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright, that's fine. That's the process there is perfectly fine. But eventually we got to start judging the results. Okay, cool. We'll find me some offensive linemen for the low. That's it. That's the simple thing. The process there is not bad, but eventually we got to look at the results. And it's not just the offensive line. I actually think their problems go bigger than that. I think they had some accountability issues for a little bit there. Sure. I think they had some discipline issues, mostly behind the scenes there. I think Russ was involved in that too with the accountability stuff. I think their coaches went on the same page. I think Pete handled the defensive coordinator changes differently. You know, like I remember talking to a lot of people about like how he handled DQ differently than he handled Rashard, then he handled Norton, then he handled Clint Hurt, and it just made things more difficult for the guys who succeeded Gus and DQ and things like that. Particularly when the talent drained. It's funny, Pete gets a lot of like. Pete's not a total meddler, but that was one time I heard that he's became pretty much a meddler on that side of the ball. But anyway, going back to John and the roster construction, John's general thought process is perfectly fine to me. Hey guys, I'm not about to overpay in March for like slightly above average talent. The draft is where you can get guys who build the meat and potatoes of your roster. That is perfectly fine, John. I agree, 1,000%. Now go do it.
On principle, I agree too.
Yeah, now go do it though. You know, go do it. And that the doing it is just not there. It really is just results. And some of the stuff you can't fully. Sometimes the process was fine, the result was not. Malik McDowell. I did some reporting later to figure out that process wasn't great. But even if the worst case scenario was like, okay, maybe he's just like he's late for meetings or something like that. Or he's just like, a little bit of a hard head at first. Well, he just broke his face on an ATV before camp. Like there was nothing to foresee that. But some of the other stuff with the results is just not there. The 2017 draft, that it really needed to be there. The 2019 draft really needed to be there. The free agent classes have just been a mess. And the really bad part, I think, with the free agent class is not that he's bargain shopping, which is bad, but it's that when he does spend, it doesn't hit. Like if you were someone who's like real cheap, but when you do spend, it's on a really nice couch or it's on a California King mattress. You're like, oh, okay, well. You're cheap, but when you cashed out, it made sense. It's fine. You got this nice ass bed, right? But if your version of cashing out is, well, now we have Draymond Jones making $50 million. Well, then I don't trust you. If like if your most expensive free agent addition one year is like giving Luke Jokel $7 million, well, now I don't trust you. It's things like that that I think that's where the process and the results have been bad. It's not just that you give me a Laken Tomlinson. Laken Tomlinson bargain, for a salary relative to play was probably fine. He played him like $1 million or something. He played like $1 million offensive lineman. That's whatever.
But you're starting $1 million offensive lineman.
Yes, well, that is where the process is a little shaky. But like having him is like whatever, because you're probably getting your ROI is about even, right? You're right. You probably shouldn't do that, but. Your ROI is probably whatever. It's like the Draymond deals or like even Rayshawn Jenkins or, Jerome Baker's, or Tyrell Dotson's where it's like you're giving guys $7 million, which I think is what Baker made. And it's like, he didn't even make it to Halloween or whatever, That's where I'm like your results are just bad.
Mom, can we have Jordan Brooks? And he's like, no, we got Jordan Brooks at home.
Yeah,
instead it's Jerome Baker, right? It's Tyrell Dodson. And, you know, I mean, we're being hard on John, and I think all of it is justified. This is someone who came in and built a juggernaut, and some of that is luck, but I think some of it is also that he had a Midas touch in the draft. 3 straight years, he touched the face of God in every single draft. You know, when it comes to AAV, you know, just value over expectation for draft picks. 2010 through 2012 is the greatest 3-year stretch in modern NFL history.
Absolutely.
But like a long time ago. And the strength for John Schneider, I think, has been identifying. Peripheral is probably not the right word, but in lieu of whatever the perfect word for that is, peripheral players, I'm talking about the skill position. He has brought a lot of wide receiver talent into this team. He's brought a lot of secondary talent into this team. He's had very good running backs. And I think the thing that he's been best at, aside from those early drafts, has been midseason acquisitions, has been bringing in Quandre Diggs for a 5th rounder, bringing in Ernest Jones for a 4th rounder.
Carlos Dunlap for
Marshawn was a trade 4th rounder. Like, yes, he did these things, but when it comes to the offensive line, he feels like a guy that is betting on an inside straight draw every single hand. And if that one card doesn't hit on the river, you're out all those chips. And it's like, okay, you missed that inside straight draw for like 11 straight years, man. Like, maybe play this hand a little different.
Well, yeah, and we're hammering him a little bit, but I think it's fair. This is going to be like his 15th offseason or something like that, you know? And I only think...
Is he the longest tenured GM in the NFL? Ooh, if not, he's close.
Yeah, that'd be a good question. I'm not sure. Well, I think technically it's always going to be Jerry, because Jerry is the owner and the GM.
Yes,
I think it's
right,
all. I think no one can technically top Jerry in that regard. Outside of Jerry / owner guys, maybe. But I also think it's fair, you know, to be that critical, because I can't think of. I would say maybe 2020 is probably the year where I thought the roster didn't get as far as it should have. Like, that was probably the year. If you were actually going to punt on Pete, that would have probably been the year. It would have looked a little funky because they won a division, obviously.
Right.
But I think you could have, John had got up there and said that same thing. Is like, hey, we underachieved in 2020. I don't think anyone would have disagreed, Pete included.
Sure.
Like, that team should not have lost to the Rams.
There's a lot of top-end talent on that team in 2020.
Yeah, they should not have. That's the last time they won a division. They should not have. They should not have lost in the wild card round to a team whose starting quarterback got taken out of the game in an ambulance in like the first half or whatever. Yeah, so that was probably the year. The one year I can think of where the talent didn't get as far as it should have. There's an argument for 2018, though. That Dallas team was going to say,
better. Man, that Cowboys loss in 2018. After Russ's best season, and he threw the ball like 12 times in the first 3 quarters, and you're not scoring any points. That was the first time I looked at Pete different.
Yeah, that was. I wouldn't throw that in there, but if you want to, that's fine. Like, so, but there hasn't been. There's more often. It's like, well, we need better players. You know, it's been so very clear, and I think going back to the trenches thing, we could honestly hammer offensive line stuff. Is why I don't want to focus. I don't think they have just. It's just like, oh, fix the O-line. You guys could go to the Super Bowl. The D-lines have been very mediocre as well. Leonard just became the first person to hit double-digit sacks, which is like an arbitrary measurement of trench play, but it's
another great midseason trade from John. Credit where it's due.
And it's like that he's the first person with double-digit sacks since Frank in 2018, and Jay Reed had.
Come on, man.
That's an unreal drought. Even the bad teams usually have someone cracking double-digit. You know,
I mean, 10 sacks is great, but it's like the equivalent of a 1,000-yard receiver. Like, it's a good season, but you're not all pro just for getting to 10. Like, you should be able to be finding guys that can get you 10 sacks.
Right, particularly now that we got 17 games. And again, that's an arbitrary measurement of trench play, but I do think it speaks to the overall lack of impact players in the unit. You know, I think that's a big issue.
I would love to see the last 10 years of defensive sacks by Seattle and sacks allowed on offense by Seattle, because I'm going to guess those numbers are very, very different.
Yeah, and some of that is Russ's fault too.
Of course.
Yeah. Sure. A lot of that, probably like half of that is
well,
Russ's
okay,
fault.
Let's do pressure rate then. Right?
Yeah, that would probably be
look at pressure rate on both sides of the ball over the last 10 years. Probably a pretty big delta there.
Yeah, and I think that is where you also, if, I feel like it's very critical. It's fair to be critical of like the front office there too. It's not just like if John had an O-line whisperer, everything would be fine. I think they really struggled to get dominant trenches, like really dominant, like where you got someone who the other team when they're practicing is wearing that dude's jersey in practice because they know if we don't block him, we are screwed. Like now they have Leonard, but I even think like the Jadeveon Clowney trade, the Leonard Williams trade, the Carlos Dunlap trade, even the Jamal Adams trade to an extent was part of about their pass rush. All of these are problems born out of the fact that you didn't want to pay Frank, which on its face was fine. If you decided Frank was not worth $100 million, okay. But get me another pass rusher who can do what Frank does then. It's the process was fine, results are bad, and it took him years.
Yes, it's the same thing with the Geno conversation. It's very easy to say, you got to do better than Geno. All right, how are you going to do that?
And how many
quarterbacks on the planet right now are better than Geno behind this offensive line, right? I'm open to moving on from Geno Smith. I have yet to hear someone lay out how you're going to do that from the 18th pick in the draft.
Yeah, it's not 18th pick, 8th pick. I think it'd be how many rookies that have been drafted since, let's say 2020. No, because Geno came in 2022. So let's say after they traded Russ, how many rookies drafted in that span have been better than Geno? It's
CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I'd say Stroud's probably just as good. And even this year, like they're probably gonna. He had a down year. He had the same year as Geno. It's worth, he had the same issues as 100%. Like almost the literally exact same minus the receiver injuries. CJ's were worse, but CJ's interior O-line was buns. The pressure was getting to him. It impacted his decision making. Their offensive coordinator wasn't as good as he was the year before, Bobby Slowick. And what do you know? Geno's numbers and CJ's numbers are damn near the same, advanced and raw. Man. Oh, so it's like of all these guys that were drafted,
the Seahawks are winning the AFC South. This year's Seahawks win the AFC South. They're beating the Jags and the Titans and the Colts this year.
Yeah, absolutely. But
this year's Texans are not winning the NFC West.
Yeah, so I think the other thing to be hard on the front office about is that trench play. It really does come back to that for me. When I look at every team that makes the NFC, I usually look at just the NFC, but if you want to compare the AFC, that's fine too. But the two teams that make the NFC title game, that's when I really get critical and analyze and relative to the Seahawks. Like when I looked at the Niners and the Eagles, that 2022 season, oh my Lord. Like the difference in trench play was just out of this freaking world. That Eagles D-line was insane. It's 70 sacks that year. Sacks aren't everything, but that's an unreal number. And I forget who made it. The Lions last year and the Niners last year. These guys got blue chip dudes. And I think the other thing that the reason why I brought up that as well is because John gets a lot of credit, more than I would think from fans, actually. It's pretty fascinating. A lot of credit for fixing problems he created. And some GMs have to do that. If you're there long enough, you'll end up doing that. But like the Ernest Jones thing, it's like, oh, wow, John, that was a great move. Well, needed to do that because you signed Tyrell Dodson and Jerome Baker. It's like you necessitated Ernest. So, yeah, you went and got him, but I only applaud you so much. Leonard Williams, same thing. Leonard Williams was a great move, but you're the reason we needed a Leonard as well. There's other ways to get good players, and I think the Frank thing, that one really sticks out to me because they kind of have never gotten an edge as good as Frank since then. They've tried. They keep trying to get an edge guy who's as good as Frank Clark.
Uchenna's probably the closest, right?
And yeah, he's a good. I think they have good guys, but like Frank is really good. There's a reason he went and made like 3 Pro Bowls or something in a row as soon as he got to Kansas City. So
absolutely,
I think that is really what stands out to me. Why I'm probably most critical is that like half the good moves, not all to be fair, but like half the good moves are just fixing a problem that was created by the same folks. That's why I would have just got rid of everybody. If I was going to get rid of people, I wouldn't have tried to sift
Quandre
through.
Diggs and Jamal Adams. The Jamal Adams trade ended up being a massive whiff. The Quandre Diggs trade was awesome. I mean, the return on that investment was massive, but like It had to be because you lost so many of your poker chips on the Jamal Adams trade. And
well, it wasn't even the Jamal one in that case. It was the Quandre. You needed Quandre because you drafted Marquise Blair in the top 50. And he wasn't good enough to play safety. And you drafted Tedrick Thompson and right outside the top 100.
Yeah, Delano Hill and Tedrick Thompson.
Yeah, so it's like the Quandre move was great. But why did you need Quandre in November or whatever, or October?
That's right.
Because of you. You know, that's not. So it was a great move, but why did you need him? You know, you already used a top 50 pick on a safety, and a top 100 one essentially on free safeties, So that's where I'm most critical of the front office, and not just John, it's all his staff too. It's like, bro, of course, half the good moves are just to cover for bad ones. That doesn't make you good to me in the NFL.
Net neutral I feel like net neutral at best is kind of how you gotta look at John Schneider. And look, man, this is why we love having you on, is because I think that's such a good point. I'm a believer that if there is a capital T truth out there in the universe, it is a pure white light shining in from the universe, but then it hits a prism of human perspective, and we're all seeing that light through a specific prism. So that light might refract green towards me and blue towards you and red towards someone else. So if you're looking at John Schneider positively, there's a ton of stuff that you can point to and say, yeah, he did all this stuff. If you look at him negatively, you can say, look at all of these misses. If the goal, which I know yours is, and certainly my goal is to get as close to that white light of truth as possible, then to me, yeah, he has been net neutral for a long time now. Now, that being said, he is still the general manager of the Seattle Seahawks in 2025.
Right.
And he has some decisions ahead of him, as every GM does, but there's big ones for Seattle. And, we're going to see how this plays out over the next few months. But the first decision has been made already. They can Ryan Grubb, and that sounds to me, you're closer to the flame than I am, but it sounds to me like a Mike Macdonald decision.
Yeah.
Right? And that's great that McDonald has already earned the agency within the organization to be like, we don't have the same philosophical view of this offense within the construct of the larger team. He got to go. I actually don't hate that move got made right away. And there's an argument to be made, hey, he could get better in the second season, blah, blah. It was a steep learning curve. Whatever. This is the NFL. It's a steep learning curve. That's the reality of the situation. Ryan Grubb's going to go make a pile of money rest of his career, coaching offenses, either the collegiate level, maybe the NFL level, we'll see. But they've got other big decisions on top of his replacement. I'm going to circle back to potential replacements because you had a great article recently about, some potential options there for Seattle. But man, just with personnel, they got some decisions to make with some of the most important players on this roster. To you, who stands out as, all right, man, you gotta address this, and then I'm gonna put a little pressure on you and say, how would you address it?
Yeah, and I think to kind of put a bow on what we were saying with John, I think John's like an okay GM. I don't think he's outstanding, which is kind of his reputation. I don't think he's like awful. I don't think he's Bill Belichick, who was probably one of the worst GMs there was there for a very long time. I think John's fine. The problem is they just want more than fine. They do. I don't care what they do. My checks from the Athletic clear whether they make the playoffs to go to the Super Bowl or go 0-17. So he's fine, and they want more than fine. But yeah, I think they have, I would say, a Geno decision, a DK decision, a 2022 draft class decision, and then like a Ernest Jones decision. I may be missing something, but those are probably off the top of my head the most.
2022 was Walker, right? Walker and Woolen?
Yeah, so that's Charles, that's Ken, that's Boye, that's Abe, that's Kobe, that's Reek, and then Ken. So that whole draft class is extension eligible now.
Pretty good draft class. Just credit where it's due.
Yeah, that was
pretty good draft class.
I was even going to say that to not devil's advocate because it's a positive spin, but like John, I think he had like 8 top 100 picks after the Russ trade, and he did okay. Like he got good players. So. He got good players with those picks. I think if off the top of my head, he got Charles, Boye, Ken, Abe, Zach Charbonnet, Derek Hall, Jacson, and Spoon. And those are the 8 top 100. picks, the only one I wouldn't have probably taken there at the top 100 is Zach. That's like 7 of 8. To me, I think that's fine. I think the issues with the Seahawks are probably that, what was that, 2 D linemen and 2 O linemen probably need to be a higher ratio, but it's fine. That's 8 good players. 8 good players, 7 decent value, I would say, if I remove Zach. You can remove Ken too, but I'll keep him. So that's 7 of 8 good value. So yeah, he's done some good stuff. But let's actually, we can go to that 2022 class, because those are really some going to be important decisions too, because they hit on some spots that are tough to hit on. Abe's a hit. He's like pick 72. He's a starting offensive tackle with pick 72. That's good value. That's great. Even if,
and a very, very good one before his injury.
Yes, correct. And I think he will be better when he's not just thrown into the fire to block Nick Bosa in week 11. I think just kind of
welcome back from 18 months of rehab.
Yeah, here's Nick Bosa, and that's the nature of the NFL. It's kind of how it is, but that's
of course, sure.
I'm grading on a curve when I recognize that's like this. Yes. It's just, that's how I'm looking at the game in that way. So that said, in that class, I would probably just lock up Charles. That would probably be it. Yeah. Everyone else, I'd be comfortable getting through the draft. And then if you want to do one of those August extensions, first day of camp like John's usually does with Reek or Abe, Boye, if you like, those I would probably wait on to see what we hit on in the draft. But Charles, I'm not waiting. Like we were just talking about the whole O-line track record. Don't add left tackle to the list of your needs. Please, God, do not do that. Charles is fine. He's a good left tackle. I think he's barely old enough to rent a car without providing a major credit card. So, keep Charles Cross. I forget what the O-line market is. It's in the mid-20s now, I think, on an APY. Don't care. Pay Charles, keep it pushing. You just 100%. You just have to 100%. Have to do that. Charles is his own agent, I believe. So they'll have negotiations with him, just like they did with Bobby. Just pay the man. I don't even think it should be that complicated. But the rest of the 2022 class, I'd probably just wait and see what you can get. Because they're all good players, but if you're talking about paying them a premium, I would maybe pause on some of those. I would just want to see Abe with a full year back after the injury. I want to see Reek with more consistency. I want to see if Boye can be one of those 10 sack guys we're talking about. And if you want to lock Kobe up, I think you can do that now because that's not a market resetter. That's probably just like same type of deal they gave like Puna.
He was a revelation down the second half of the season, man.
Yeah, he's one.
He made that transition to safety pretty well.
He did, and he's one that probably benefits the team more to lock him up now than it does Kobe. Like Kobe can probably actually bet on himself, play it out, and then go get a bag if he would really like to next offseason. So that
problem is a guy like Kobe doesn't have the cachet that if he loses a knee, I mean his market might be dust.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a gamble on himself. Some guys are more comfortable doing that than others. That's kind of up to him, his family, what he wants to do. But yeah, I would just only probably lock up Charles out of that class, and then that's how I play the rest of that draft class out. And then the problem with Ken, he's who I didn't mention. The problem is drafting Zach is just kind of eliminates the desire to just do something big there. It's like that's why you draft Ken or that's why you draft Zach and then Kenny McIntosh.
Well, and I'm gonna play my own trumpet here a little bit, but my prediction a year ago is we are gonna see the running back market start to swing back around because you had some of the best players, some of the best football players in the world making less money than backup guards, right? They were making nickel cornerback money like the best running backs, right? And we saw some teams throw real money at running backs this year. And by real money, I mean comparative to what the market has been. Right. And they were smashes, man, smashes. Mixon and Saquon and Derrick Henry. And I think
Aaron Jones.
that was the best thing. Aaron Jones. I think that was the best thing that could have happened to Ken Walker from a personal finances standpoint because he's young and has shown that he can be good. And so he and Reek are the two that, to me, are kind of the biggest question marks because there is an argument from an analytical perspective, especially for both of them, that they are upper right quadrant players at their positions. And if you're upper right quadrant at corner, that's real money. That's real money. Is Riq Woolen a $15 to $19 million a year guy? Because the other guys that are in the top right quadrant of all the metrics that Woolen consistently finds himself in this year, they're all getting that bag. I'm very curious to see how they approach that because, okay, you say he's not consistent. I think Riq's top end game is absolutely there. His best games, he's been excellent, and he just has measurables that you're not going to find. You just can't replace 6'4", 4'3" speed and ball instincts. There's a lot of other stuff that you can point to as like maybe why you don't pay him, but there's a team out there that if he becomes available, Riq Woolen's going to get free agency money, like first wave free agency money, in my opinion. And I think that could happen with Walker too. And to me, I think Charbonnet has shown that he can handle the load. We saw that this season. He had some of the best running back games that we've seen from Seahawks in recent memory. But I do think this is a team, and I think we're seeing a trend in the NFL where teams are saying, you got to have two. I wonder if Kenny McIntosh has shown enough for them to say, you know what, you can be our number two. And instead of going Walker 1A, Charbonnet 1B, it's Charbonnet 1, McIntosh 2. We'll find someone else late in the draft.
Yeah, I think with Riq, I remember I was talking to this agent in Indy a couple of years ago. He doesn't have any Seahawks clients, but that's just kind of where you just talk to agents. And I remember he was showing me like part of his little spreadsheet that he was going to pitch to. I forget what it might have been. He might have had a client on the Eagles or something. I can't remember. But his client was about to go to free agency, and he was showing me, like, here's what it looks like. Here's how we're going to present, blah, blah, blah. Because I was very curious what it looked like. And it was his client.
I'm super curious.
Well, part of it, the relevant part to Riq is, like, it had his client's numbers against wide receiver ones. And I don't have all Riq's in front of me. Maybe I'll do that for, like, an offseason project. But
ooh, that'd be a good one.
The numbers were really good. And I think his client ended up getting paid. Maybe it wasn't the Eagles. But the point is, I bet you Riq's are really solid. Like, I bet you Riq's numbers over the years against all the wide receiver ones that he's faced are really good. The problem with Riq is there's the bad numbers will come against guys where you're like, dog, how did DeMarcus Robinson score on you like multiple times? You know, like what? How it's just gonna be some ones where you're like, what's up? You know, like he gave one up to like Zach Ertz on a slant, you know, gave one up to like Odell on his birthday in that Ravens game. And he's still a name, but at that version of Odell, he gave up a touchdown too. It's like, it's going to be stuff like that. That's like, okay, come on, man, lock in. I think Tyler Huntley threw that pass too. So it's like a focus thing with him. But I think you're right. The best version of Riq is as good as any cover corner in the league, probably outside of, I would say, probably just Derek Stingley Jr., who is just, that dude is out. He's amazing. Maybe Patrick Surtain as well. Those are two. I was going to say
Surtain might be in that combo too.
Those are two of my favorites for sure. Those two. But like the best version of Riq.
Second hardest position in football, man. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah.
Number one corner is the second hardest position in football.
Easily. So I think I would still wait though, just to see what you can get, because the last thing I would ever want to be like the negative on, like, if I was a coach, the last thing I ever want to worry about is whether you're going to be focused or locked in. Because I can't really coach that out of you. Like, you, at the end of the day, everyone's grown. So it's like, are you going to be locked in today? If I ever have to question that, that's just not really something I'm cashing out personally as a coach. And Mike McDonald strikes me as a very similar guy. Like, he's very clear. I'm about as high as on Riq as anybody there is. I think he's a baller. But like, his own coach has talked about that. And that's not even my analysis necessarily. It's his own coach who's like, when Riq's not locked in, we see what we see on tape. When he's locked in, he's one of the best. If I got to worry about whether you're gonna be locked in, that's not. I can't have that. I can't give you the 18 mil. If you just like, if you're not a great zone corner or whatever, your press man's technique needs work or whatever, you need to get more interceptions. I can deal with all that. But like, whether you're locked in, that's non-negotiable to me, particularly when you play next to Devin Witherspoon, who I literally never have to question whether is locked in. You know, like, and if the coach is questioning whether you're locked in, I think that would be the only reason I think if you're just like, nah, Mike, I don't think we should pay Reed because he'll be locked in all the time, I'll be like, you know what? That's fine. But like you said, the talent doesn't warrant that level of skepticism. It certainly does not. Whereas with Ken, I think you're right. We did see a little running back renaissance this year. And I think this is why some teams should hire Pete Carroll and why I would have either kept him and John or fired both of them. Because Pete was not wrong. His philosophy was not wrong. Look at these teams investing in guard. Look at the guard market from last year. Look at the running market from last year, running back market, and look at the teams that had good offenses this year. Teams are running it right freaking at you. We're not seeing the little cute outside zone stuff that like McVay and Shanahan were doing, getting to the perimeter. No, it is power. Teams are running up the gut at people, pulling guards and double teaming and hitting the A and B gaps. Real football is back.
The best teams in the NFL are playing the type of football that our dads want to see them play.
And that Pete Carroll was saying
like
was
man's
the recipe.
game football. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
and so
and I think that's what Mike wants too. I think that's what Mike McDonald wants.
Right, and that's Mike's. And no one's reinventing the wheel here. There's only so many ways to win football consistently over time. Like the math checks out, the film checks out. So yeah, I think you're right. The running backs, the elite ones, are going to start to get. Teams are going. It's a copycat league. They're going to start paying guards and centers, and we're going to start seeing inside linebackers get paid and running backs get paid because of all this too high stuff. You know, it's cyclical. I would just wait. The other decision that I can't even fathom how much this is a no brainer is I'm keeping DK Metcalf. Like that one just is such. It's so obvious to me that
what a relief. I don't got to make this argument again on air.
So here's the thing that I think. Here's the argument against. The argument against is not anything that everyone says about like the high point passes or like his attitude or the penalties or it's not any of that. It's really not. It is that when you have Jacson, you don't need your X receiver, your outside guy, to be like a true one. Like you really don't, because the way they look at a lot of ones right now are Jacksons, are CeeDee Lambs, are Jamars, are guys who just move around a lot, kind of shiftier slot.
I mean, that was Keenan Allen for 10 years.
Yeah, the ones look a little bit more like that. Even look at how, the
Stephon Diggs, another guy like that.
Yeah, there's still Nico Collins and Mike Evans, and AJ Brown's for sure. Like you can have those. T. Higgins is not a true one, but he's the perfect complement to Jamar.
He would be on most teams.
Yeah, exactly. And so you can have like that big body outside guy who's your one. That's fine. But I do think you can find an outside guy to be your number two, and it doesn't have to be $30 million a year. That's fine. But that's so that if your argument is like, Mike, we can go draft another X, and if he's not as good as DK, we just need that skill set. We just need a big dude who is fast, that defenses respect, to open it up for Jacson. The college game is producing those guys. There really is not an argument against that. It's true. My argument against that is you already have one. So I think you should keep that guy and just get him the ball more because he already does and has a reputation to do schematically everything you want as an offense. DK doesn't need to do anything different. If he never gets better than he is literally today, that would be fine to get where you want to get as an offense.
Louder for the people in the back, bro.
He doesn't need to he doesn't need to open up the route tree. He doesn't need to catch more jump balls. If he's just literally as good as he is today, I think he's 27 years old, just literally today, they'll be fine because of what he brings schematically. I thought Mike McDonald's answer was very revelatory, I would say, on Tuesday when he was asked about DK's season, and he mentioned nothing about how DK performed. He talked about how they let DK down by not getting him the ball.
Absolutely.
And they were far too comfortable just saying, oh, they're doubling DK, so let's get it over here. That is, I get it in principle, but there's a balance, and Grubb never found the balance. I think if there's anything to be critical of Grubb of, I think you could honestly point to, besides the play action usage, that being maybe number 1A to 1B is like, dude, you couldn't figure out how to get DK the ball, you're fired.
Come on, man. That's just it. Look, I mean, you and Chris make salient points every week on the show. But in this last episode, you had two things regarding DK. Well, one of them was framed around Ken Walker, but I think it applies to DK. And the other was specifically directed at DK Metcalf. Like, the whole point of getting great quote unquote skill position players in the NFL is that you put the goddamn ball in their hands.
Correct.
And I can't remember if it was you or Chris, but you guys were in lockstep on this. How many times were defenses saying, all right, DK's not beating us deep on this. Here's 8 to 10 yards of cushion. Fucking throw him the ball.
That was Chris. That was
3
Chris.
yards past the line of scrimmage and let him get 7 yards on first down. And now it's 2nd and 3. And maybe he breaks one. There's a good chance that he gets that first down. But beyond the value of getting those free yards, there's 2 other benefits that I think are ancillary that can become primary. One is you cannot have a great scorer on your NBA team, which is what DK is, and not design looks for that player. You cannot tell one of your best scorers, you have to go create every look you're going to get in this game. No, you got to get that guy in rhythm. And that is something that, and look, I'm no Shane Waldron apologist. I think the NFL has spoken their truth on that. One thing he did is he got him the ball.
Right.
Brian Schottenheimer was going to die before he left a game without DK Metcalf getting 10 targets.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
DK Metcalf had 1,300 yards and like 14 touchdowns at 22 years old because Brian Schottenheimer is if I'm going to lose this game, it ain't going to be because my best player didn't have the football.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And that point that you guys made was with regards to Ken Walker when y'all were talking about the Ryan Grubb decision. And Corbin did a great piece on this week, I think yesterday, on, kind of some of the decisions that went into moving on from Ryan Grubb, and the Giants game was brought up, right? I think Ken Walker had like 5 carries in that game against a bad team. Like, you just got to get your game breakers the ball because, yes, okay, Jake Bobo can catch the ball if you throw it to him, and the tight ends will catch the ball if you throw it to him. Bobo and Barner and Fant and Farrell Brown, they are not going to flip the field the way that DK Metcalf has. You have to give him a chance to flip the field. And it was so frustrating to see that not happen. And maybe he becomes a little bit more affordable because he had a down year statistically, but it was not to me because DK Metcalf wasn't good enough.
Yeah, the basketball analogy is perfect. It's like you're playing those 2009 Orlando Magic, and like what was their coach? I think Van Gundy was their coach at the time. And it's like, whoa, hey, coach, why does Hito Turkoglu have 20 attempts and Dwight Howard has like 5? Well, they're doubling Dwight. Right. Well, that's a win for our other team, coach. Like, we have to make sure Dwight is getting the ball. And I use a center as the analogy as opposed to like a guard because that's kind of the similar gravity. It's like they're doubling, so you kick it out. It's like the same thing in basketball, I would say. Like, yeah, for a game or two, maybe Rashard Lewis or JJ Redick goes off, but it's like our offense still has to get Dwight the ball.
Jameer Nelson only going to get you so much,
right? Yeah, like Jameer can't be leading us every night, right? We're eventually going to lose. That's a win for the defense or the other team, I guess, in basketball. If Jameer Nelson is the focal point of our offense now because they're just doubling Dwight and DK, I think, are like really good parallels in this regard. And I also think
beat me with AJ Barner.
Yeah,
every defensive coordinator is saying, beat me with AJ Barner. I dare you.
Or just beat me with Jacson. Like, they didn't even really prove they could consistently do that. It was like, cool. Jacson went for 150. We still won because you didn't get the ball to DK. And I think the other thing about DK, that it's a weird critique too, because there's no reporting behind it, and I would know too because I'm in the locker room. It's this like idea that he's like a malcontent, like he's just like pissing everybody off in the locker room. It's very weird. He's just like this diva with this attitude. If we were going to see DK be a diva with an attitude, it would have been this season, because he was misused this season. To mention the other coordinators, this was the least effective DK's ever been, like in terms of on-field production. He was a decoy for how many games he played? 15? He was a DK he was a decoy for 15 weeks. And only one time...
I called him Decoy Metcalf in the articles.
Yeah, because that's what he was. And only one time that he really, really just like, yo, Grubb, what are we doing? And I don't even think that was about him getting the ball per se. That was more about like, Grubb, you're acting like we can't run by these guys. What's up?
You know what malcontent number one wide receivers don't do? fucking block through the whistle until they're getting flagged.
Yeah, that's a smaller part of why I love DK too. Like he's willing to block and he's good at it.
His dad was an offensive lineman, man. He is an offensive lineman in Des Bryant's body.
Yeah, and he enjoys that. He wants the ball too, but he's definitely. I've never heard anything. If some reporting comes out later that makes this a cold take or whatever, then fine. But I've been around DK literally his entire career. I've never heard anything off the record, on the record, in passing, talking to coaches, players that this dude is in meetings talking about what AJ Brown is doing, like getting the ball, like Deebo Samuel, like tweeting like I need the ball, or even Doug. Remember at one time he was just screaming like I need the fucking ball, And Doug was right, he did need it, but DK, to my knowledge, is not that guy, and it's weird. It's like perceived. As
I don't remember any fans talking about how Doug Baldwin was a diva, and Doug Baldwin was this, that, or the other thing that you hear about Metcalf, but he had the exact same personality.
Yeah, so that's a weird. I've never really understood where that's like he gets angry that they lose, but like it's not in a way that is like disruptive. He's just as angry as everyone else. Like DK's angry when they lost the same way Dwayne Brown was. They both really
and that
did
dude
not
stands
like
at the podium every week and gives all the credit to his teammates.
Yes,
he's not out there saying they're letting me down.
Yeah, even like I said, this year would have been the year, and he would have been right. By the way, if he'd have been like, "Yo, man, I'm tired of them accepting that I'm doubled," and I'd have been like, "Yeah, you're right." Never really has done that privately or publicly, to my knowledge. So yeah, though he would be an easy one to keep, pay whatever you need to do. I really wouldn't care, blank check type of situation. And then lastly, I'm keeping Geno. I think
elephant in the room, man. Let's talk about it.
I think there's a ton of ways to make the case for Geno, but I really think for me it's this simple. Again, I view everything through the lens of the NFC. I don't really care what the AFC is doing. I don't think that's pertinent to Seattle's long-term success or short-term success.
I agree.
Honestly,
I agree.
Because if you get there to where it's like, damn, can we beat Mahomes? You've done a lot of things right for that to be the question your franchise is asking.
Also, can we just say Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes absolutely destroyed the discourse around quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, oh, you can't win a Super Bowl with this quarterback, that quarterback. Motherfucker, they've won like 60% of the last 20 Super Bowls. Like, apparently you can't win one with Joe Burrow or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or Justin Herbert or Jalen Hurts either.
You can't even get there with Lamar. Apparently,
Apparently.
Or Josh. Josh hasn't gotten there either. So, yeah, I think, they broke the discourse for sure. It's like, can you get to the Super Bowl with Geno? I should start firing back. Can you get there with Lamar Jackson? Because you haven't. Can you get there with Josh Allen? Because you haven't.
I'm on record with that take, man. Come on board.
Can you get there with Justin Herbert? Because you haven't. I think does he even have a playoff win? I don't even know if he has
He hasn't won a playoff game.
There you go. So it's the wrong question to ask. But for me, the way I look at Geno in a simple way, at least these days, the simplest version I make the argument is look at the guys who have made the NFC title game. Look at the support they've had with their play caller, their O-line, and their weapons. If you give Geno any of those, just look at the last four, I would say. Let's just do the last four. The answer is yes, Geno would get there. If you just plop Geno into the Lions today with no prep, he don't even know the plays. If Geno played in the Lions' next playoff game, would they win? Absolutely. Of course. Come on. I think they would. Come on, man. Of course they would. If right now, I don't know if Jalen Hurts has cleared concussion protocol by the time this comes out, but let's say he hasn't, and somehow Howie Roseman was able to just borrow Geno to play the Packers on Sunday. Would the Eagles win? Yes, they would. They would probably go to the Super Bowl if Geno was given this great O-line with these all-pro players. He's already got equivalent receivers, but was given the play caller. Yes, I 100% think that. I think framing can the Seahawks get to X benchmark through the lens of Geno is the wrong question. It's, do you trust the people to build the thing around Geno? Because what these other teams have done is build it. They put all these super friends around Brock Purdy, including play caller. I don't think we should take play caller out of we talk about a guy's situation.
No, we're circling back to that in a sec.
Yeah, so if you give Geno, Kevin O'Connell, and the Vikings O-line, and Aaron Jones, and Justin Jefferson, and T.J. Hawkinson, and Jordan Addison, Do the Vikings win 13, 14 games, whatever? Probably, man. Probably. I think they, and I don't think that's a hot take. I don't think it's crazy to say Geno's better than Sam Darnold. I don't think it's better to say Geno, if you just ask both of them to throw the ball, Geno's better than Jalen Hurts. I don't think it's crazy to say these things. It's really not to me. Baker, too. Although Baker's really good these last couple seasons.
Baker's so good, man.
I think Geno and Baker, I view them very similarly. Those guys, they threw the 100%. Ball a shit ton in college, and you get them to the pros, and they're very comfortable doing it. But the best way to really help them is to give them protection and give them a run game, too. This is what Baker had with the Bucky Irving kid, too. So, yeah, I think that's really been my view of Geno the last, couple seasons is give him what the other guys are getting, and yes, he will do that. He will absolutely do it. Will there still be interceptions? Of course. Matt Stafford led the league in interceptions when he won the Super Bowl. Threw 17 of them. Does anyone know that? No. Only me and Richard Sherman seem to know that. But does anyone does anyone care? No, because he won the Super Bowl. He also threw 40 touchdowns. But no, because he won the Super Bowl. And I think Geno would do those type of things if he had that same setup. I think the better question is always not can you get there with Geno? It's can they build it around him? No one's doing it by themselves. Right. Even when Russ got there, he had a really great situation. Half of it was on defense, but he had a really great situation. So I think that's why I'm so in favor of keeping Geno. It's not even just what else are you going to do, which is a relevant question, but it really is you can build it around him. I don't think you need a better quarterback than Geno. I think if all the circumstances are right, you can go to the Super Bowl with Geno. We've seen guys who are shittier than Geno by far.
100%.
Get there. 100%. Get there. I really think you.
Dude, Jimmy Garoppolo was a pass away from being Super Bowl champion. Jimmy Garoppolo.
I honestly, this may be a hot take now too. I think Geno's better than Goff. I do. I just think that Goff has been very fortunate. He makes good throws too. Goff isn't bad, but look at the two teams that he's taken to NFC title games and won to a Super Bowl. Man, those rosters were freaking loaded around him both times.
What's Jared Goff doing behind this offensive line?
Dying, getting taken out in an ambulance like that John Walford guy did when he played the playoff game.
What's Jared Goff doing with Shane Waldron and Ryan Grubb calling his plays instead of Ben Johnson and Sean McVay? Right? Context matters. Context matters, man. All right, so here's the big question. So, and I'm going to frame it the way that I talk to, some of y'all listening know this, some of you don't, but my day job, I work in real estate and been very, very fortunate to have success doing that. One of the things that has helped my clients be so successful in a competitive Bellingham, Washington market is if we're looking to buy a house and there are other offers on the table, my question to them is this. It's not how much do you want to offer on this house? It's at what number, if you heard that someone paid 1% more, you would say, okay, you can have the house. I need you to define that number for me and then be willing to go all the way up to it. Chances are we don't have to go to that number, but I need you to be ready now to go to that number so that when I'm calling you and saying, hey, look, this other offer is at X, can you match or beat that? You've already made that decision. So I'm going to frame this question that way to you with Geno Smith. And we're going to assume a 3-year contract because I can't see him taking less. At what number do you say, you know what? If another team is willing to pay 1% more, you can have him?
Probably whatever Burrow makes, I would say. Because I definitely view it in the lens of the other quarterbacks because that's what's going to dictate the number. Whatever Burrow makes... whatever Lamar makes, because I think that they're all, if I have their numbers right, are right above where Tua is. Tua, Trevor Lawrence, and Jordan Love, I think all got a version of the same contract. I want to say this
offseason. 53 a year.
Yeah, because that's where you start talking about alternatives. Because then it's okay, right? You're talking about real estate. All right, cool. You letting the other people have a house. Where are you gonna live?
That's what I'm saying, man.
Where are you
That's what I'm saying.
Because if I'm Geno, and I don't think John Schneider would do this for what it's worth, but if I'm Geno, I'm like, okay, John, even if let's take the age out of it, because those guys are all younger than Geno, Jordan Love, Tua, Trevor. Mm-hmm. That's fine. Mm-hmm. Cool. Take the age out.
They've all probably taken the same amount of snaps, though, in their career, if you want to talk mileage.
That's true. But
Geno's been a starter for like 4 years.
Yeah, if we looked at the snaps, particularly Tua, who keeps missing games, Geno probably has the same number of starts or very comparable number of starts or around the same spot. But even then, I'd say, John, on the open market, Kirk, who has one playoff win, I think, Kirk off an Achilles got like 45 or whatever. Like, we gotta start there. Fair or not, you gotta start there. Because that's the thing about the market. You're not only measured against the good contracts. Like, the receiver market is what it is because of a bad contract of Christian Kirk. That's why it is what it is. Everybody's agent could have been like, well, just because the Jags are dumb doesn't mean we got to be dumb. They were like, nope, stupidity is a pattern. Everybody gets $20 million now because Christian Kirk got whatever he got. Because that's really what blew it up. Like, it was just moving okay, and then Christian Kirk got paid, and everyone was
I'm so glad you said it, because that is exactly the name I had in the holster for this conversation.
Yeah, because so it's very similar in the QB market, because that would be the rebuttal. It's like, well, Mike, why we got to do something dumb because the Falcons did? Great question. Because that's how it works, unfortunately. That is how it works. You're not only measuring your client or your player off of the good contracts. It's just the market. It's not the market relative to whether I agree. It's just the market, and they better get it done before some of these other guys who are. I think Baker could re-up. I think too. If not, before some of these other guys re-up, because that's going to be a problem too. Don't let Sam Darnold get paid before they deal with Geno. Oh, good God! Don't let that happen. So yeah,
Listen, man, I run comps every day, and if someone quote unquote overpaid for a house 3 months ago, I'm sorry, man, that's a data point.
Yeah, that's
a data point.
And also the reason why I don't care really what your QB makes on average annual value is because one, the position is so important. But two, if you said 3 years, I'd make it however many years we need to so we can toy with it to make the roster better. The best thing that the Bills and the Chiefs did was give their guys these long-ass deals. So it's like, oh, we need to add a lineman. Hey, Patrick, can you come in here and restructure your thing real fast? Here's some more money. All right, see ya in 2030. The Bills can do that with Josh. I don't know if they have, but they can. And you can just keep doing that and doing that. Because at the end of the day, very much like in real estate where you need a house, you need somewhere to live. You need a quarterback. You need a quarterback. And ultimately, if he's good enough and you can build it around him, the price won't matter. It really won't. No one's complaining about how much Mahomes makes in Kansas City. And right. Only to a certain extent are they complaining about the roster around Mahomes. Now, their left tackle situation just went to shit unexpectedly. But the rest of their O-line is good. Their D-line is good. They've been drafting well with DBs. Their linebacker room is solid. Like, they have the team. And their quarterback makes a shit ton of money. Same thing in Buffalo. Same thing in Baltimore right now. Same thing in Philly right now. Jared Goff makes a bunch of money. So that's why I wouldn't even really care what he makes. Like, the number don't matter. Give Geno $50 million. Give him 55. Give him 53. Give him 60. I don't give a shit. Just make sure you do the rest of the stuff too. Because here's the thing, which is why also the convo gets kind of messed up, is even if Geno was making the veteran minimum, you still need to hit on value picks and value signings. You can give Geno $30 million a year again. He shouldn't take that, but let's just say he does. Okay, you still have to find O-lineman for the low. You're not flush with cash now. You still have to draft D lineman for the low. You still need to, address other positions at a cheap rate. And that's why I think it's good we spent the time talking about John, because no matter what you do with Geno, the objective and in general, the money you're working with is still about the same. You still have to find the rest of the team for the low. I think the worst lesson that Seahawks fans, some of them learned from the Russ stuff was that Russ was on the low. That Russ was the cheap contract. Dog, everyone was cheap. Wasn't no one making money but like Zach Miller or, and Sidney. I think Sidney and Percy. Sidney, Percy, and Zach probably eating up like 30% of the damn cap. It wasn't just that Russ was cheap. Russ could have been making on those teams. He could have been the highest paid quarterback in the league, honestly. And the results would have been no different because they had the best defense in the low for pennies on the dollar. So, yeah, I'd give Geno whatever. Tua's contract, Jordan's contract, Trevor's contract. There probably honestly isn't a number that I'm like, nah, to be honest, because you still have to build it around him. That's why these guys make all this money. Because honestly, you can make the same argument. Jordan Love played like 9 good games last year, like $55 million. You know why?
Shoot.
Because the Packers were like, 1, we need a place to live. And 2, if we build it around him, who gives a shit what he makes? And that really is the thing. It's not as if like the Seahawks can make the Super Bowl if Geno makes 45, but can't if he makes 40. Or the inverse. You know what I mean?
Dude,
the
yes.
APY is not determining whether you can get there.
100%.
Doesn't matter. Give him a $100 million
man.
deal. I don't give a shit. Because if you don't fix the O-line, it doesn't matter where he's making $55 million or $5 million. Just like it didn't matter in 2022 when he wasn't making nothing, and it didn't matter in 2024 when he's making like $25 million. His contract is not the what's inhibiting your growth as a franchise. It's the other stuff.
Can you? So here's the thing. I'm pretty good at talking about what I'm good at, and I try to be just as good at talking about what I'm not good at. And the worst club in my bag is understanding the NFL salary cap. Can you give DK the type of money we're talking about and give Geno the type of money that we're talking about at the same time? And if so, how do you do that? Is it setting Draymond free? Is it moving on from Lockett? What are the options here?
Yeah, I think without having like over the caps numbers in front of me, I think if you just were to get rid of Lockett, Draymond, and George Fant, I think you clear like $30 million or something like that.
George Fant, not Noah.
You can do both. I'm fine with Noah. Another team player, by the way.
I like Noah too. I didn't realize George was on the books for real money.
Yeah, well, it's not like real, but I think he signed like a 2 and 9 or something like that.
Yep.
So if you think Abe is fine and you got a guy like Mike Jarrell as your backup, I think you're okay. You don't need the veteran swing tackle contract at this point, unless you think he should just be like Charles's backup at that price, which is very valuable. That if they decide that, then that's perfectly fine. Because Charles goes down. Charles hurt his toe for like a month a couple years ago, and they were just awful. So it's valuable to have that. But yeah, you can easily do it. These other teams are like. Here's the thing about over the cap for Seahawks fans. I would love for them to explore. Go look at what some of these other teams are spending here.
It's nuts.
Everyone does not have clean books. The Chiefs have had to make decisions on folks too. The Ravens have as well. A lot of teams that have had these good rosters have had to make decisions.
Yeah, you think the Ravens don't want Patrick Queen on their defense right now?
And the thing is, it really just comes down to what ownership's willing to do. The way, to answer your question, the way you do it is you extend Geno. DK has like 3 void years on his deal after this. You just turn those into real years. Maybe add another void year after making those 3 years real. And you're just pushing all that money back. It ain't even that complicated. You're basically just borrowing from yourself. To put it in more normal financial terms, you're just like, am I willing to just swipe the credit card, defer all this money, which is really what the Eagles have done, I believe. They use void years quite a bit. It's just say, hey man,
well, you're listing a lot of the best teams in the NFL right now.
Yeah, because that's the way to. You can't just. It's hard to pay everybody what they're worth in real time. No one in the NFL is really doing that. Like the Chiefs are literally not. They're underpaying Mahomes literally every year.
Rams, another team that's done this.
Yeah, you can't pay everyone what they're worth. In real time. Eventually, their cap hits will be commensurate with the on-field production. But in real time, you need to be able to pay some dudes like extend Jalen Hurts on a $55 million deal, but his cap hits like $10 million. You know, even when they paid Geno a $75 million deal on base value, I think his first year cap hit was like $10 million. And you can do that with a bunch of dudes. You just have to just keep pushing the money out, which is really up to whether the owner wants to continue paying those guys if they are A, no longer on your roster, and B, no longer good enough to justify that. That's the fear with the void years. But if you're about winning now, then who gives a shit, you know? Or if your owner is not like broke, which most of them aren't, then you're fine. So that's how you do it. You just swipe the credit card, try to win now, and then deal with it later. Jody's a billionaire. Who cares?
Well, and here's the thing. I think it's such a salient point that you're making. But the thing that gets lost in this, and this is like my drumsticks are like going through the fucking calf skin at this point. I've banged this drum so many times, but like, people got to understand, we always talk about, you know, and like you said, swipe the credit card. I think it's an apt metaphor for this. But you got to understand that with salary cap, this is like your limit on the credit card going up 10 to 12% every year. Correct, and there's going to be new TV deals and ticket prices going up and concession prices going up and all of these things happening where teams are just gifted like 20, 22, 25 million dollars a year extra every year once the league revenue is split up. The only outlier was the first year of COVID when there were no fans. Right?
Right. Yeah.
But barring another global pandemic, this is how that works. And it's the same thing I have with my clients. Like, okay, Bellingham's market is going up 10 to 12% a year on average, as far back as you want to go with MLS data. You may feel like and I'm not saying, look, don't buy anything you're not comfortable with, but how long you plan on living in this house? And the average is people live in it for 7 years, but the answer that I get is 10 to 15 years. Well, all right. Maybe you overpay by a couple of percent now in 2025 money. How much equity do you have in 5 years to make that next move? And this is the argument I made when DK Metcalf signed. I don't know what it was. It was like the 5th highest paid wide receiver.
He was the 6th,
is he a top 5, 6? Okay. Is he a top 6 wide receiver? Nah, but he's not that far from it. But you know what? By the time you get to this year, by the time you get to 2025, he's like the 19th highest paid wide receiver. That's value. And that's kind of how I feel about this. If the player is good enough to commit to, and it feels like an overpay in terms of average annual value, and I'm so glad that you pointed out what I feel is a little bit of a logical fallacy, is, oh, so-and-so is making so much average per year. Trust me, man. Trust me. Like, the top wide receiver, Jamar Chase's rookie year, is making like a third of what Jamar Chase is going to make per annum when it comes time to re-up him. And by the time he's in year 3 of that deal, he's going to be the best freaking value of all wide receivers out there besides people who are on their rookie contracts, like a Jeremiah Smith coming out or whatever. So I don't mind paying the premium right now, because by the end of that contract, if they're as good as we think they are, there's going to be a value there.
Well, and I think I was saying this last year too. Paying a quarterback is not inherently bad. The only thing that's inherently bad is paying the wrong one. If he's the guy, no one cares what he makes. The only time we question a quarterback's salary is if we think he's not the guy. Like, if the only time people in Green Bay are going to start caring about Jordan Love's contract is if he's not the guy. If he's the guy, if he makes $70 million, it doesn't matter. If he makes $55 million, it really does not matter if he's the guy.
Nobody in Detroit is bitching about Jared Goff's contract
because he's their guy. He's their guy. I'm not super high on Goff, but he's their guy. No one cares when he's the guy. If Daniel Jones was the guy, his contract wouldn't look bad. It only looks bad because he's not the guy. It's not the numbers are not bad.
That's the cautionary tale.
He makes like $40 million a year. Well, it's just not the guy. $40 million's a steal if he was the guy. It doesn't. But that
was like a really bad roster. Like, that Giants roster is a lot worse than the Seahawks roster.
Yeah, well, they also just shouldn't have paid him because he's not the guy. They shouldn't have not paid him because it's $40 million. I don't pay anyone who I don't think is the guy. So that's really if Geno's the guy, it's a blank check, relative to age or whatever years, whatever. But
the beauty is because he's 34, it doesn't have to be a blank check. Like, there is going to be real value because he's 34 years old. If he was 26, it's a totally different conversation.
So, like, for me, and I get why John did the deal that he did. Good for him with Geno the last time. But for me, I'm not even coming to the table with you if you're not the guy. Because I don't want to pay you anything if I don't think you're the dude. Honestly, like if the Niners are a good example, right? If John Lynch thinks Purdy's the guy, then you give him whatever the hell he wants, honestly. Because whether Purdy's making $35 million or $60, which is what Dak makes, I think, if he's making $35 or $60, you're going to bitch about it if he's not the guy. Either way, you're going to bitch about it if he's not the guy. That's right. If he's not the guy, you're going to be like, why are we paying $35 million for someone who's not the guy? There's no number when you start talking about extensions where you're like, oh, well, it's cool. He makes $40 million. Even though he's not the guy, that's all right. No, man. He could be making 25. People bitch about Geno now. He's making 25. But if you think he's the guy, then I don't think you got to wiggle over 10, 5, whatever on the million on the APY. But if someone's not the guy, you just need to let them walk. I think that's where the discussion framing gets a little wonky too. I don't think you should pay anyone if you don't think they're the guy. I don't care who it is. If the Jags had decided Trevor Lawrence isn't the guy, then don't pay him anything. 55, 45, 35. I don't care what it is. Pay him, tag him, trade him, whatever. You should get rid of him if you don't think he's the guy. Because if he's not the guy, whatever you give him is going to age poorly. You're talking about like how the contracts look down the road. They all look bad down the road if they're not the guy, like Christian Kirk's contract. He's not the guy. They literally need to go draft the guy after paying him. And Brian Thomas Jr. That is where we get kind of lost in the QB discourse. It's like there is no right number for someone who's not the guy. There's no right number for the wrong dude.
Yeah, and I think there's so much clarity in reducing it to a binary situation like you are. It's either a 1 or a 0. If he's a 1, then you pay him what the market says, and if it's a 0, then you don't. And that is something like I said that I try and really impress upon my clients is if this is the house for you, then be willing to go to what the value for this house is. And if it's not, don't buy that house. Let's get another one. If you believe Geno isn't the guy, draft Jalen Milroe. I don't give a shit. But try that. You know what I mean? Get Jackson Dart. Try that. Free up the money and hope that you can recreate a top 12 quarterback in the aggregate with that money, which I don't have a ton of confidence in this front office to do. Now, you mentioned earlier when we were talking about quarterbacks, how important the play caller is. I'm working on a little theory here that I think, of course I think this because it's my idea, I think it's a great idea, is the biggest market inefficiency in the NFL right now is coordinator pay. Because we are seeing offensive and defensive coordinators make bottom of the roster money, right? If I'm Jody Allen, and easy for me to just transport myself into, generational billionaire status. But if I'm Jody Allen, I'm just fucking paying Liam Cohen or Ben Johnson head coach money to come be my offensive coordinator.
Oh, yeah. Well, the issue is they can block a lateral move in those instances. Because they have to be able to get a promotion of some sort. How does that work? Okay, so here's this is me admitting my ignorance here. How does that work if the Seahawks go to Detroit and say, hey, we want to pay Ben Johnson $8 million a year to be our offensive coordinator. We're going to pay him top end head coach money to be our offensive coordinator. The Lions can say, nah, we're going to pay him 3. Yeah, the good question. That's a good question. I think what you'd have to do is make him something more, kind of like what I think Eric Bieniemy. Here's an example of the scenario you're talking about. Okay. The Commanders went to the Chiefs and said we would like him to be our OC, even though he's already your OC. But I think they made him associate head coach too, or something like that. So by title, he got a promotion. I think that's the little wiggle around that. So I think you can fucking do that. You definitely
go get Liam Cohen or Ben Johnson or whoever, man. I don't know. I just feel like you look at the Chiefs and they're the gold standard right now. They're the new Patriots, and their offense, they have their moments, but their offense has been mostly mediocre for the last 2 years, and they've been the best team in the NFL that whole time. Because Steve Spagnuolo has had the number. All of a sudden, the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, they lose Tyreek Hill. Is Tyreek Hill worth more to the Kansas City Chiefs than Steve Spagnuolo, who is turning the youngest defense in the NFL into the number 1 defense in the NFL by DVOA for back-to-back seasons, or top 3 back-to-back seasons? To me, that's a way bigger return on my dollar than paying a player.
Yeah, the player thing. Yeah, I think the way you put it is great. It's binary with the quarterback. No matter what your guy, when a guy's cheap, people complain about him too if he's not the guy. There really is no number on that.
Of course.
A guy could be cheap as hell, but if you don't got the guy, it really is, do you have the guy or not? And if you think Geno's not the guy, I'm not really here to argue with anyone who's not. That's fine, cool. If you want them to see if Jackson Dart's the guy, if you want them to see if Jalen Milroe's the guy or Dylan Gabriel's the guy, who knows? Those are fine experiments if you would like to do that. I just don't think haggling over whether Geno's worth 20 million, 30 million, 40 million, it doesn't, 50 million, it doesn't really matter. If you think he's the guy, you should pay him what guys make. It's just that simple to me. If you want to move on, go ahead. I'm really not opposed to, I think you said this earlier, moving on from any player. To be honest, if the Chiefs, if someone calls the Chiefs and be like, hey man, we want to give you Mahomes, I don't think they should hang up. I think they should be like, all right, well, what are you giving me? Oh, we'll give you Lamar and Derrick Henry. Oh, actually, shit, I might actually do that. Or we'll give you Lamar and Kyle Hamilton. Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Like, give Spags, Kyle Hamilton, give Andy Reid Lamar. Sure. I'm like, all right, see you, Mahomes. Go to Baltimore. Well, I don't think that would be the Chiefs fans obviously not do that. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't think anybody is just irreplaceable. It's all about whether you got something else going. If you're like, hey, Geno's so bad, like my auntie called me yesterday. She said, Mikey, how come we fired Ryan Grubb? I was like, well, he just wasn't good at his job. She's like, well, why we keep Geno? He's not good at his job either. I was like, all right, that's a good point. I didn't really feel like arguing with her at the time, but she's just so convinced Geno is just not it. And I'm like, cool. If you think that, then get rid of him. But it's not Geno's it at this price. That's stupid. And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. And yeah, I think it goes back to some of those other variables you can get for the cheap, like your play caller. Geno's play callers keep getting fired. There's probably something to that. One of them's already been fired twice. It's probably something to that, to why he's performing the way he's performing. I really wish, I wished, not, this sounds mean to Sam Howell, but I'm glad he got in a game during a meaningful moment. Because I promise Seahawks fans, I swear to you, I'm not lying, it would look like that more often than not if you just were like anybody but Geno.
We had Brady on our last episode, and he said the same thing. He's like, man, I was there every day in practice. Like, this is not a thing. Replacing Geno Smith with Sam Howell, it's just, I'm telling you, it's not a thing.
It's not. And it wasn't, I like Drew Lock too. It was the same thing. We're there every day, man. I'm glad Drew got in. I'm glad he beat the Eagles. That was a very fun night. But that was an outlier, man. He had a great time, but that's an outlier, man. I promise you, if you were just to swap, honestly, if you were just we mentioned the swap earlier. Yeah, man. Take Jalen Hurts, put him in this offense right now. That's it. Bring Grubb back, swap him. It would sound like January 6th on Seahawks Twitter, the way people would talk about Jalen Hurts if he was playing in this situation with this O-line, with this play call. I promise you, it would get disgusting. It would set us back as a nation if we put Jalen Hurts in here, man. And Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback, but I guarantee you it would. The degree of difficulty that Geno is pulling off, man, like. It's like almost like they're giving Geno a car with the check engine light on, the joints sputtering, you need new spark plugs, you're out of gas, and you're mad that Geno didn't get to the destination. It's like, well, we need to be looking at who gave him a car that needed new spark plugs. Who gave him a car with a faulty alternator? Who gave him a car with a bad wheel and expected him to drive from Seattle to Portland? That's what Geno's been doing. He hasn't been made. The car crashed in Olympia a couple of times. But that's not his fault. Got in it with the check engine light on and the spare on the back right wheel, Totally. And the AC don't work, but you're asking him to drive to Portland from Seattle. Well, no, he's not going to make it.
Right.
Lewis Hamilton wouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You're going to have some upset passengers in that car in that situation. Here's the last thing that I want to say on this before getting your final thoughts on a couple of wider view things is I think one of the most under-discussed parts of resetting at quarterback. All right, cool. You don't think Geno's the guy. You don't think he's worth $35, $40, $45 million a year, whatever it's going to take. I don't think it's going to take $53 million. I don't think it's going to take Trevor Lawrence money to keep him just because of the age. But whatever the number is, if you don't think he's worth it, great. I need a really coherent contingency plan because if you don't think his replacement is ready to do better than 10 wins next season, you have wasted a Devin Witherspoon rookie year contract. You've wasted a Charles Cross rookie year contract. Mm-hmm. You have wasted all of these, all of these dudes are ready to make more money, and you are punting those seasons if you're not competing. Like, there are real values on this roster. Byron Murphy, Jacson Smith-Njigba. Man, Jacson Smith-Njigba is like 5th in catches in the NFL this year at 22 years old. And if your next quarterback isn't at least as good as Geno Smith next year, you just wasted one of the very good wide receivers in the NFL. You wasted a year of his contract at a massive discount because he's playing like a $20 million player and he ain't getting paid $20 million. Like, there are ancillary costs to resetting at quarterback. You better fucking hit that guy.
Yeah, I think here's a scenario that is probably plausible. Let's say they're like, Sam, you're not good enough. Get rid of Sam. And you bring in another backup-ish guy. Let's call it Mac Jones. Let's just say the Jags don't want him. The new coach doesn't want him. They bring in Mac Jones, Geno's backup / competitor guy. And then they keep Geno, but they don't pay him. They don't touch his deal. They let it go all the way to the draft. And then they draft Dillon Gabriel. Let's insert a non-Shador or Cam player here. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
Dylan's just the first one on my mind. So they draft Dillon Gabriel. And they let them all go to camp and just duke it out. Geno, you're not QB1. There is no QB1, 2, or 3. Everybody just go. We split the reps. Line it up. Let's rock. I think if you want to do that, that's perfectly fine. I can guarantee you, I bet every dollar I have, Geno would kick those two dudes' ass. And I think he would do it. He would have done it every year.
This is a man who is at every goddamn Seahawks practice saying this. I just want to reinforce to everyone listening, this is a dude who's watching every rep.
Yes, he would kick those dudes' ass. And I think if John and the Seahawks want to do that, I actually don't even think that's that crazy. If you're like, you know what, let's not lock it up. Because we're a little hesitant on whether he's the guy. Cool. We drafted a dude fairly early, maybe day 2-ish, and we got another guy who started a lot of games who maybe was in a bad situation, like a Mac Jones. Let's say even they keep Sam Howell in the situation. I wouldn't, but they bring in a Mac Jones. Justin Fields, whoever. Insert high draft pick who flamed out. Doesn't matter who it is. They bring in those 3. So you got a rook, you got a medium vet, but not really, and then you got Geno. Let him duke it out. Fine. Geno's going to smoke him. I guarantee Geno, even with a new OC where he doesn't even know the guys, that would make it really interesting because he has no familiarity with the old guy or with the new guy, excuse me. He would just smoke him. But I hope they do that experiment so we can just see a full-on real competition. Because remember when it was a competition with Drew, it was not close. It was not. I like Drew. It wasn't close. It wasn't close. It wasn't even close with Geno not putting up numbers. I don't even think he threw a touchdown in the preseason. And it still wasn't close. So I think that's probably the only compromise you're probably going to get from Seahawks fans is that type of scenario where you keep Geno, but you don't pay him. You try to go for a young buck. You keep another cheapish guy on the roster like a Mac, like a Justin Fields, whoever, Jameis, I don't care. Maybe somebody younger than Jameis. But you go in, you do it. Guarantee he smokes their boots. Guarantee by the time we get to August 29th or whatever of 2025, everyone's like, damn, we should definitely pay Geno before the season starts. I guarantee you
that might be the best thing for Geno is for them to take.
Yeah, no, I think Geno, he probably doesn't want to do that because that would be like 5 months of him being pissed off. But sure, that would it would up his value again. They would get into those preseason games, like the fourth quarter of a preseason game, you got Dillon Gabriel in there just getting sacked and throwing pick sixes or whatever. And they'd be like, damn, 7 is our guy, isn't he? Like, we're not going to move around from this,
That's right. All right, so last thing before we get you out of here, I know that you were paid to cover the Seahawks, but one of the things I love about you is you are a ball fan. Mm-hmm. So let's zoom out. Seahawks are out of the playoffs. The real season's beginning this weekend. Mm-hmm. I'm going to talk to you about the playoffs and Super Bowl here in a second. But if you got an MVP vote, who are you giving it to?
I would give it to Lamar Jackson. And I think one thing that's very important when I view MVP votes, and I do this if I had a basketball one as well in the NBA, is I don't penalize people for having good teammates. And I think I just really, it's a really weird way to go about it when you think about it. It's like, well, he's got such and such. Okay, cool. But we have all these metrics in the NBA and the NFL to extrapolate.
Yeah, I guess neither
play.
Joe Montana or Jerry Rice are good because they had each other.
Yeah, I think you still have to perform. I think boiling it down to who someone has or how a team looked when they weren't in there is always very strange to me. It's like, oh, if we pluck LeBron James out and pluck out Derrick Rose, who's in, it's just so weird to make the debate that you're like, this is Josh Allen supporting cast. This is Lamar. Damn the supporting cast. Watch the games. Who's better? I watch games. I watch so much film of other teams. Like Lamar is just operating at a very efficient level, running and throwing. Damn the numbers for a second. Just the way the efficiency I'm talking about when I just watch it, like the way he can get the offense going when they're in a rut. I think Lamar, the way he's throwing the ball is just crazy. I think Josh is too. Those would be my two. But I definitely give it to Lamar. And I think what Lamar has a really good feel for, I think he's been better at this than in some years past, I would argue, is just kind of knowing when it's time to put the cape on. And I think football is so much about feel. That's why I love watching games. There's two ways I watch tape of people. I watch the broadcast copy. I do like the little one that just there's no commercials. And then I'll watch the film just like quiet with my headphones on or something. But that broadcast copy where you can hear the crowd and see all the special teams plays, and it's not just the offensive film, which is what I also watch, is you feel the momentum in the moment. Like sometimes you really got to feel that part, and that's where you're controlling the game. I think Lamar, the great quarterbacks are just good at that in general, where it's like, oh, damn, our defense is reeling a little bit. They just gave up an explosive. They clearly need to get some things together. Let's put together a 4-minute, 5-minute drive right fast. We don't need a deep shot right here. We just need to possess the ball for a second. I just need to run for some first downs. Let's control it. Let's just possess it right fast. Or they're like, damn, we're in a shootout. Our defense is cooked. We need 40 today. Let's roll. The great ones are really good at that, but I think Lamar has been very good at that. And this is with his OC as well. I think they're working as well as anybody in the league. Like, I think Lamar is just killing it. And then when you look at the numbers are crazy. But just watching the games, it's special. What he's doing is, there's so many games you watch where you're just like, you know why that team in purple won? Because they had number 8. Even if you didn't know his name or no accolades, you're like, damn, number 8 is killing it right now. That is why they won this game. I think he is the scariest player in the NFL. I'm not ready to say he's the best, although he's in that conversation, but I think he is the single scariest football player on the planet. I don't think it's close. I don't think it's close. Because he is a game breaker from any level on the field. And Josh is this too. I think those two are probably the scariest because the way they can run the ball and they give him. Josh might just run for 50 yards for a touchdown, and Lamar might too. And they just do it in different ways. But I think the way Lamar is throwing the thing right now is just really crazy. And the way he's staying out of bad plays too. I think that's a really underrated part of quarterback plays.
4 interceptions. 4 interceptions. 41 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 4,000 yards passing, 900 yards rushing. I mean, this is like truly uncharted territory, even in a modern NFL that has positioned itself to be pro passing and pro offense. We haven't seen what Lamar is doing right now. And look, man, I don't want this to come off as anti Josh Allen. I don't want this to come off as anti Joe Burrow, how crazy are the Bengals in that they have the NFL's leading passer, a Triple Crown winner at wide receiver, like what, 6th person ever do that or whatever in Jamar Chase, and maybe the defensive player of the year and the NFL sack leader by like 4 sacks in Trey Hendrickson, and then miss the playoffs. Like, I need Seahawks fans to understand that if you're criticizing Geno Smith or DK Metcalf or whoever for the team's shortcomings, that the Cincinnati Bengals won fewer games with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Trey Hendrickson.
Right.
Like, I need that to be a part of this conversation. But to me, yeah, it's a 3-person race. Burrow's you're never going to give an MVP to a team that didn't make the playoffs, even though, good God, that's a 3-win team without him. That to me is real value. But the other thing that I push back on is the narrative aspect of it. Like, it's someone's turn. Right. Like, how could Josh Allen be this good for this long and not win MVP? How could Joe Burrow be this good for this long and not win MVP? Like, honestly, the fact that Michael Jordan only had 6 MVPs is insane to me, because there weren't only 6 seasons where he was the best basketball player on the planet.
Right.
The fact that LeBron James only has 5 MVPs is fucking insane to me, because he was the best basketball player on the planet for like 13 straight years. But you can't give the MVP. You can't, quote, give the MVP to the same guy 13 years in a row, right? It's got to be Steve Nash's turn, or it's got to be fucking, whoever. Like Charles Barkley, amazing player, highly underrated. At no point was he better at basketball than Michael Jordan. Charles Barkley even said, when I played Michael Jordan, it was the first time in my life that I realized I wasn't the best basketball player in the world. In no world should David Robinson, Hall of Famer, whatever, have been awarded an MVP over what Michael fucking Jordan is doing.
Right.
And so I don't care that Lamar's won the last 2. I don't care if you feel like Josh Allen's stats were better than Lamar's last year. This year, Lamar, to me, is the most valuable player in the NFL.
Yeah, I think I mentioned getting rid of negative plays. True Media, where I get a lot of my stats from. People read The Athletic.
They're great.
See that very often. They have a stat called splint percentage, which is sacks and interceptions per dropback. So basically the negative plays, right? The lowest percentage in the league belongs to Josh Allen. The second lowest right now belongs to Lamar. Like those two, I think
fucking insane.
That is the one
those
for me. I love that negative plays. I think Sam Howell led that last year. He was just the king of negative joints. But that I really love that one. And you're wondering, oh well, Mike, if that's the case, why not Josh? Well, then Lamar also is throwing touchdown to 8.6% of his pass attempts, which is pretty nuts. That's like kind of where Mahomes was in that 2018 season. Josh is at like 5%.
That's where Aaron Rodgers was during his MVP season.
Yeah, so it's like
high 8s.
Lamar is avoiding the negatives as well as anyone and achieving the highs better than anyone at maximum efficiency. And the tape bears that out too. The dude can just whatever his offense needs at any given moment, he can do it. I agree. He's the scariest player in the NFL, and I would go as far to say it is not particularly close.
I'm with you, man. All right, here's the last question for you. You got to cut a check to a bookie right now for $10,000. But if you get this exactly right, you're going to make $80,000. But you have to do it. Who beats who in the Super Bowl?
I think this is so tough. I think the Ravens end up beating the Lions. That would be my guess. I think the Ravens.
Talk to me about it.
I think the Ravens end up beating the Lions.
Because the Ravens are going to have to win a couple of road games, at least one road game to do that.
Yeah, and I think you can do it, if you've got the team. It's not just the quarterback. I know the narratives usually focus on them. Like, the reason the Chiefs were able to do it is because their scoring defense. It was hard to score on them whether they were at home or on the road. So when they had to go on the road last year, it wasn't just Mahomes will be fine. It was, like you said, Spags will be fine. It was very hard.
Everyone hating on Lamar for, not scoring enough points to beat the Chiefs last year. Can't get it done, whatever. Well, Zay Flowers fumbled 6 inches from the game-winning touchdown. The Chiefs, what did the Chiefs score? 17 points in that game?
Yeah.
No one's bagging Patrick Mahomes for only scoring 17 points in an AFC Championship game.
Yeah, that'd be my guess right now. I don't feel good about the AFC, really. I think it's just so tough because the Ravens defense has been really solid. But I do have questions about when it's winning time. Can they have someone get to the quarterback at the level that you need to really end the game? Like, who's there? Chris Jones, who I know can go end a game. I know Von Miller will go end a game if the defense is on the field.
Chris Jones, low-key, is the Mariano Rivera of our era in
him
the
and
NFL.
Aaron Donald were
like
both
that dude has closed out playoff games. And Aaron Donald, right? That's your Trevor Hoffman, Mariano Rivera.
Yeah, so that's the only reason I have a little bit of pause. I just really am thinking that at the end of the day, if you got Lamar, you can do it. I'm not really too worried about them going on the road. I'm still pretty high on the Chiefs. I just really think I should preface this. This is if Zay Flowers is playing. I think
Yes,
if
right.
I think he matters that much to their offense.
Yes, he does.
If not, I think I'd have to. I guess if I got to make it now, sorry, maybe I have to amend this because Zay's hurt. So if there's no Zay Flowers, I think we get the Lions beating the Chiefs. That would be my guess. It's tough. I had to do it if then, but I forgot about Zay. But that would be it. I think this Lions team, man, their defense is just fighting. I really think they can go anywhere and bring it, man. I think it's going to be so hard to go to Detroit. I think they're coming out of NFC no matter what. Even though as beat up as they are, man, they're just making it happen. And I think if the Ravens are at full strength, they can go anywhere and win. If they're missing Zay, I think the Chiefs go get it done. I think what's been really underrated about the Chiefs is like, I think Mahomes leads the league in game-winning drives or something this year. You know, like it's not just that they're getting a lucky bounce here or there or a bad call or a no call. I know the blocked field goal in Denver was a little fluky. Like for the most part, man, they're clutch. When you need a conversion on 3rd and 7, Lamar can get it, Mahomes can get it. When they need a stop on defense to get the ball back to Mahomes, they make it happen. You know, they're a clutch team there. They operate really well. And that's with their O-line being a mess on the edges this year. So, yeah, I think if I had to, I don't know Zay Flowers' status, if he plays in this game against Pittsburgh, they should roll him. But if he's hurt, that screws them. And then, I go Lions over Chiefs. But if Zay's good, I go Ravens over Lions.
You know, one of my favorite quotes in all of sports history is from Joe Montana when he was asked about clutch, right? Like we're talking about one of the ultimate quote unquote clutch performers in NFL history. And I do think the caveat to this conversation is so much of what goes into who is clutch and who isn't has nothing to do with their personal performance. But that said, you look at the breadth of the career, Joe Montana, he's Mount Rushmore clutch athlete. He had a quote on clutch, and he said, I'm paraphrasing, one of the biggest misperceptions is that the most clutch players elevate their game in the highest leverage situations. So it's not true. The most clutch players are the ones who can be closest to their non-clutch performance in that situation. Because everyone's asshole is puckering. Mm-hmm. And that's when performance goes down. And it's the guys who can, in that situation, do all of the things that they did when the stakes weren't as high and let everyone else fold. And to me, that is the story of the Patriots dynasty. That is the story of the Chiefs dynasty, is that when it comes time for the game-ending, title-winning play, it's them that's making it. Because they're just doing what they've always done.
Yeah, and that's really, I mean, it's weird. Everyone thinks I'm just like this big Pete Carroll just lover because of my Twitter picture. I probably should just change it at this point.
I've seen you wear so much hate in the comments for that.
Thankfully, I'm not too bothered by.
I know you're not.
I'm not too bothered by positive. I don't get too high on positive remarks or negative remarks from strangers or even people I know. Honestly, I'm just the same person either way. I say thank you or I ignore it. Doesn't matter. But anyway, I bring up Pete to say Pete kind of was coming from the same school Joe is. That was his whole thing about treating everything like a championship opportunity. In essence, it was like, you don't got to get up for Monday night. Just do the same stuff you do in practice on Wednesday when no one's watching, because that's good enough. Don't need you to do nothing extra. We practiced this blitz. We practiced this route. We practiced this concept, this pass rush. You did it Wednesday when no one was watching.
Everyone that played sports at least a high school level listening to this knows this feeling. There is a difference between being on the pitcher's mound up 1 run in the 2nd inning versus being on the pitcher's mound up 1 in the 9th inning. I'm telling you, pitching paid for college for me. Like I've been there. And I'm telling you that the 9th inning is different.
Right.
Your thought process is different. You are so acutely and physiologically aware of every fiber in your being when it's a full count with the runner on second in the 9th inning versus in the 2nd inning. And if you can do what you do in the 2nd inning, in the 9th inning, you become a legend.
Yeah, and I think that was, I mean, I liked a lot about what Pete and Mike McDonald are kind of getting at as leaders. I think Mike's going about it a different way, where he is kind of being like, let's play up the big moments, which is not bad. It plays into human nature, like you said. we all know the fourth quarter mean more than the first. You know, you can't coach that out of me. I'm not stupid. You know, I've been playing since I was a kid. But Pete's whole thing was trying to coach it out of him. Like, yo, execute what you did on Thursday, on Saturday in the walkthrough at the hotel, what you did in the first quarter. You do all that. When we get into 2 minutes, it's nothing. You know, so
you think Scott Norwood? I'm going back now because I'm older than you. You think Scott Norwood's life is different if he misses that 47-yard field goal in the Super Bowl against the Giants in the first quarter and they lose 20-19? People are like, oh man, if he had kicked that field goal, it'd be a different game. But you're not saying, oh, they would have won. But you missed that field goal in the last play of the Super Bowl. That's who you are for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You're the guy that lost the Bills a Super Bowl. It's the same fucking action for that player, whether it's 8 minutes left in the first quarter or 3 seconds left in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, no, and that's what the Chiefs are really good at. And for what it's worth, I think the Lions, and that's why I'm so high on them. I do think they operate pretty well in the clutch too. Not perfect, but they operate really well, and they just have their identity. They're really just prepared for the moments. They know what they're going to do. Dan seems to spend a lot of time on the details of things. Pretty much like, this is what we're going to do in this situation. You know, there's been stories where he'll talk to the refs like, hey, we're going to run this trick play that involves this person being eligible or whatever. Like he's really prepared, you know, for the moment. And I think that's really what's going to be key for them, is just like out preparing the opponent. That's what the Chiefs do too. They knew the overtime rules better than the Niners last year. Sometimes it's really just that simple. There were guys in the Niners who just didn't know the rules, you know, with the coin toss and everything, and the possessions and the clock. And it's like all the Chiefs knew. They all knew. And they performed.
I don't think there's a more tragic Greek character in modern sports than Kyle Shanahan, man.
Yeah, man.
28-3 in Atlanta. 11-point lead with 5 minutes left against the Chiefs in round 1. Overtime against Chiefs in round 2. Dropping an interception in overtime against the Rams in the NFC Championship game. Brock Purdy blowing his elbow out in the NFC Championship game. But like, at some point, it does become a part of your DNA. And look, I am not so much of a coward where I'm going to ask you a question, not be willing to answer it myself. And I kind of hate my answer. And I think people listening are going to hate my answer, but all I can do is be honest. I think the Chiefs beat the Eagles. And I only say that because 11 of the top 13 Lions snap counts on defense are injured, right? Like at some point you just have to have the Jimmies and the Joes. I was super encouraged by how good the defense looked against the Vikings on Sunday night. But like, if Jalen Hurts is right, that's the best roster in the NFL. And I think they come out of the NFC, and push comes to shove, I would be rooting for the Eagles in that situation. But like, I'm not betting on them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, the Chiefs weren't, we all talked about the Chiefs this year like they're actually not that good. They sleepwalked to 15 wins in 16 games.
And would have gotten the 16th pretty easily. I think if that game had, 100%, if they cared, they would have kicked Bo Nix right out of the playoffs. Yeah. No, I like the Eagles. I like the Eagles roster too. I've come down to earth a little bit on Hurts because he hasn't proven to be the same game changer as a runner, and I think that was a big part of what made him the guy. That's what made him the guy. Sure. Like, especially in that Super Bowl, it was his legs that were so much of the difference. He's kind of making that same evolution Russ tried to make after the Super Bowl. Was like, all right, well, now I'm pocket guy, unless it's the tush push. And I'm like, nah, Jalen, that's not how you were tilting the scales. You were tilting them because
that's right.
You could also take off. Like, you're fine if you have to throw. He's a decent thrower. But like, if that's the thing you do, okay, well, now we're the margin is not where I want it to be. Now you're not tilting the scales anymore. Now you're just like, good quarterback. You were just whipping Spags' ass in the Super Bowl because you could also run. I think he's making the same mistake Russ made later. Yeah, that makes sense. You get concussed, you get hurt. I get it.
There is a case to be made that Jalen Hurts' box score in his lone Super Bowl appearance is the greatest statistical performance in Super Bowl history.
He was balling. I had money on the Eagles on that game. One of my homies. I was like, "Yo, dog,
I lost $3,000 on that game. Trust me, man. I'm there with you."
He could do no wrong. He was scoring every time he touched the ball, other than the fumble. That was it. So yeah, I like the Eagles, but that one, you can game plan a way to make guys like that whose skill tilting superpower involve running. If they're not willing to do that anymore, I think they are far easier to game plan against, and I think that's what's happening with the Steelers right now too. I think one of the Ravens analysts even mentioned it in Hard Knocks. He was like, Russ is all 3-pointers and layups, and they just found a way to scheme it up. Bro, I think that's kind of what Jalen is too. But his mid,
if you don't got a mid-range game, you don't have to defend the mid-range.
Yeah, and his mid-range was running, just like Russ's was. So I think he's got to get back to that. I mean, obviously he's got a clear protocol. That's easier for me to say because he got his brain knocked around by running. So I can see why you just want to stand there and throw it out. It's easier, for me to say. But I mean, if you want to win a Super Bowl, how bad you want to do it? Go out there and start running around.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Hey, listen, you have given me more time than I could have ever expected. And you were just aces for every single minute of this podcast. Mike, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, yeah, no problem, man. I think I've told you before, I rock with your producer, Mike. Missed you, Mike. There's only two and a half shows that I'll just, whenever I got time, you can hit me anytime. This is one. My homie's in London on the Pedestrian Pod. There's another. Shout out to Adam and Stu. So whenever any of you guys hit me, I'll make time as long as my daughter is asleep. She's actually waking up now, so this is good. This is good timing.
I'll let you go be daddy, Mike. It's funny earlier when you were talking about John Schneider and you kept saying, "Hey, you don't do this, I don't trust you. You do this, I don't trust you." I was like, I got Metro Boomin on the podcast right now.
Yeah, man, I got to be able to trust you if we're gonna get this done. Thank you for having me. Hey,
Michael-Shawn Dugar, he don't trust you, he gonna shoot you, man. Hey, thank you so much for coming on. And in case anyone out there is unaware, where can listeners, viewers find more of your stuff?
You can follow me on whatever Elon's doing over there now. Still at Mike Dugar. My newest Seahawks Man-to-Man podcast is always pinned to the top of my page. My author profile for The Athletic / New York Times is just in my bio. So if you're like, dang, Mike, you write anything? Boom, right at the top. Just follow me on there. I'm on Blue Sky as well. That's like a one-stop shop, though, my Twitter or my X or whatever. Just follow me on there. Chris and I have a new Seahawks Man-to-Man podcast this offseason, although I'm going to take a little dad break. But yeah, that's where you can find anything, articles, analysis, all that stuff. Just follow me on X or Twitter or whatever.
Listen, man, I appreciate your time so goddamn much. I can't wait for the next opportunity for us to chop up ball. And man, you were the perfect guy to put a bow on this season. Thank you again.
All right, man. Appreciate you.
All right, y'all. That is going to do it for today. As always, you can find Mike and I on social media as well. I am on Twitter and Blue Sky at Jacson Bevins. That's Jacson. Remember that no K is okay when spelling my name. Mike is on Twitter and Blue Sky at Mike Barwin, and the show itself is on both at Cigar Thoughts. You can catch full video episodes on our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts. Find the rest of our socials at cigarthoughtsnfl.com. As mentioned previously, this episode is brought to you by Glenfiddich Premium Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. Y'all know I'm a huge fan of their lineup, and we are thrilled to have them on board as a sponsor of the show. One of the great things about a great Scotch is how well it plays with a good cigar, so once again, we do have our own special release of cigars that you can purchase at a terrific price as a listener of the show. The release of these Cigar Thoughts Stogies has been successful enough for us to continue offering them for the low price of $149. That's right, just $149 for a bundle of 10. As many of you know, we partnered with one of the most prestigious cigar manufacturers in the world to release these official Cigar Thoughts cigars, which you can order directly from cigarthoughtsnfl.com. Just follow the link on the show page to get these easy-to-smoke stogies rolled with 13-year age premium Dominican tobacco leaf, or hit us up on Twitter or Instagram, as many of you have, and we'll send you the details directly. The cigars come with a Bovita humidification pack and a Mylar storage bag to make sure they stay fresh, whether you have a humidor or not. Of course, you can listen to the show, and even though there won't be any new ones, which is crazy to say, you can read every article I've written at fieldgoals.com. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you like the show, please drop us a 5-star rating and leave a quick review. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. It just helps the algorithm. If you like the show, hopefully you want to see it grow and continue to be what it's been over the last 3 years. And Your ratings and reviews go a long way towards that. Thank you to all of y'all listening for your continued support of this show. You know you've only got so much time for podcasts in your life, and it is an honor to be a part of that for y'all. Please know that by sharing this show on social media and with your friends, give us the juice to keep making this happen. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, onwards and upwards, my friends.